Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Richie from Boston. Today is the 6th of June. It's 2017, and you guys have been asking me for about 7, 8 months so far. I finally got a hold of him, the man, the myth, the legend. Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Skiba. What's up, brother?
Hey Richie, how you doing, man?
Not too bad.
The man, the myth, the legend. Wow,
Indeed. There's not too many people that are speaking these days with the actual Nephilim skull in the background. So a lot of
Yeah,
people don't believe that's true.
yeah. You know, if I had time, I'm in my home office right now. So if I had time, I would have gone to my other office that has the skulls behind me. So, sorry.
No big deal. Let me ask you. I've listened to your show for years now. I've listened to all the videos that you put out on the many different forums that you have available, Facebook, YouTube, your website. How did you end up down this particularly ever increasing rabbit hole? How did you end up in this genre? I mean, this is we live in a we're labeled conspiracy theorists, you could possibly come up with. You pretty much tagged yourself with everything and you're leading the pack. So how did you find yourself here?
Wow, man. Not by choice. I, I suppose you could say by choice, but I think I was guided down this path, to be honest with you. Growing up, I've always, and what kid's not interested in giants and monsters and, hybrid creatures and stuff, right? I mean, we grow up with, Clash of the Titans and Star Wars and, all that kind of stuff. So I've always been interested in the weird, the paranormal. I actually had um, quite a number of very unfortunate experiences with shadow people growing up. And so, all those things intrigued me, scared me, and were of quite a bit of interest to me. Also been a believer in Jesus Christ. When I knew him as Jesus Christ, I now refer to him as Yeshua, but grew up in a Christian home. My dad was a Baptist minister when I was a kid, so I've been in the church my whole life. Accepted Christ as my Savior at age 7. But I used to have a big problem with the Old Testament, and we pride ourselves a lot of times in being New Testament Bible believing Christians, right? And we would go to the Old Testament every now and then for those cool Sunday school stories. Hey, let's talk about David and Goliath, or hey, let's talk about Noah and the flood. Let's talk about Abraham. Okay, cool. But I used to have those 1-year Bible plans. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but read the whole Bible through in a year. And I couldn't get very far without getting totally tweaked out, because you go into the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and you're not very far into it, and you start seeing God saying stuff like, hey, kill the women, kill the children, wipe out everything. It wouldn't compute in my head, man. I'm like, here you got Yeshua over here telling Philip, hey, if you've seen me, you've seen my Father. And here's this loving guy. He's not judged. The only people he has problems with are the religious people, right? I mean, he's hanging out with publicans and sinners, and he's loving people. He's healing people. This amazing, awesome, loving guy. And there's Dad over here, kill everybody, kill everything.
Right. And a lot of people try to hang that hat still to this day without actually looking at what lied in the background. So I hear you.
Yeah, and it is a deterrent for a lot of people. I mean, many people become atheists because we don't want to have anything to do with this quote unquote God of the Old Testament. And yet Yeshua consistently says, hey, if you see me, you've seen him. And the New Testament says that Yeshua is the expressed image of the Father. And I'm going, man, how do you reconcile that? And one day in the course of studying the subject of giants and Nephilim and stuff like that, I come across this supernatural super package deal that Tom Horn had put out. And it had, like, I don't remember, 3 or 4 books and a bunch of CD audio box sets and some DVDs. It was like the super set for, like, I don't know, $85 or $100, whatever it was. And I was like, wow, this is the mother load, So I bought it. And as I started listening to the CD box sets, Steve Quayle made a statement. He said, the understanding of Genesis 6 is literally the Rosetta Stone for understanding all of Scripture and history. Now, that's basically a paraphrase, but he said something to that effect. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty grandiose statement to make, But then I quickly began to see that he was right. because when you truly do understand what's going on in Genesis 6, all of a sudden the Old Testament starts to make perfect sense, and you're able to finally, at least I was able to finally reconcile the Yeshua and the Father are the same, and he's not this crazy genocidal, schizophrenic, prejudiced maniac.
Right.
And that opened up a world to me that I didn't even know existed. It opened up a new phase of spiritual growth for myself, because now I wasn't blocked with the Bible. I mean, it's pretty tough to be a Christian and claim your Bible as your source for truth, but every time you open it up, it's tweaking you out and you can't get it,
Right. People just can't wrap their heads around the supernatural part of it. They write it off, and it deters them.
Yeah, exactly. And so when that opened it up for me, I'm a very passionate person when it comes to, if I believe something, you're going to hear about it.
Right.
I don't have the ability to just keep it to myself. It's got to come out, And it wasn't too long after listening to those box sets and stuff like that, I actually was all right around the same time frame. I got this idea for writing what I thought was going to be a movie script, but eventually turned into a TV series called Seed.
Seed. I remember that. I was dying for that to come out. I remember that, man.
Yeah, that was, I started working on it, I want to say maybe late 2008, 2009, somewhere in that time frame, and had the makings of a rough draft in 2009. But really, Seed's origin goes quite a bit further back, at least a decade, to the late 90s. So you asked me, how did I get involved with all the research I've been doing? How did I, what led me down the paths that I took? So I'll tell a story here for your audience, that I haven't really told anybody before on YouTube. I mean, I've given bits and pieces of it, highlights of it, but I think I'll just unpack the whole thing here. And that takes us back to about 1998. In 1998, there was all these intellectual properties coming out because the millennium was coming, Y2K.
Right. Yep. Everything's going to crash.
Everything's going to crash. Or there was a lot of people capitalizing on logos and graphics and various intellectual properties related to the millennium. And this one guy had actually had the brilliance to trademark the date, January 1, 2000. He trademarked the date. We normally write like 01/01/00, right? When we write a date out. Well, he's sitting on an airplane. He's looking at the date, reading some articles on Y2K. And he says, I wonder if I just took the slashes and turned them into dashes. So he trademarked 01-01-00. And the dude had made like $300 million by, I believe it was September of 1998, in licensing the right to use that logo on baseball hats and Frisbees and whatever.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm going, wow. I mean, as an entrepreneur and a businessman, I'm thinking that is absolutely brilliant. As an artist, I'm going, what a piece of crap. I mean, on January 2nd, it's over, but who cares? January 2nd, what does that guy care if it's over? The guy's made over $300 million, So I thought, I can compete with that. So I created a logo that I eventually trademarked as the symbol of a new generation. And it was a 2K symbol that looked very much like a fraternity symbol. If you can imagine the Roman numeral 2, and like if you think of Times Roman K, but remove the vertical post, so all you have is a little wedge on the side. So you have a Roman numeral 2 with a little wedge on the side for the K. So it looked cool.
94.7 WMAS, playing the best songs on the radio. It's Brad Shepard and friends. It's 10 after 8 o'clock, 8:10.
Well, we'll ask you to put your hands together and welcome a friend of ours. We've talked to him before. This is Rob Skiba. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning. How are you?
Nice to have you in our studios. Now, you may remember, let me just refresh your memory, that Rob is the guy in South Hadley we spoke to when he built the set for the Big E's Dino exhibit last fall, which was a very imposing effort. And now Rob has moved on to some other things. Rob, there's a movie out called In Dreams, and you've designed some props for that film?
Yes, what had happened was I was going to Northampton to be an extra in the film.
Oh, you were?
And,
yeah. Did that happen?
No, it
No?
didn't because the dinosaur exhibit came up.
Oh,
and it was
okay.
a choice of $50 a day to stand around and be an extra or
Right.
make a dinosaur exhibit.
I got you.
So I opted for the dinosaur exhibit, but there was a technical number for props and stuff. And I sent it to a friend of mine who ended up getting the job, and then he called me, and I made 8,000 square feet of fake rotten apples for the film.
Now, wait a minute. 8,000 square feet of rotten apples.
Fake rotten apples.
I imagine you made them in sections. Would
Yes,
that be?
they're-
How long did it take you to make 8,000 square feet of these things?
It's about 2 months, probably.
Solid work, huh?
Yeah, solid work.
What do you make rotten apples? Is it just a resin?
It's a
type thing?
urethane foam
Okay.
product, yes.
All right. And then you have to paint them all and everything?
Well, what had happened, I spent 2 days on my hands and knees in a greenfield orchard picking the worst rotten apples I could find, and, ooh, that's perfect, throwing it in a bag, and taking them back, and I made some rubber molds, silicone molds, and then you pour the foam into it, and it expands and looks just like a real apple.
See, this is why films cost so much. It's because somewhere...
And the reason why we got hired was because the union guys who were set to do this stuff, they planted trees in Northfield in September to make a hay barn into an apple cider mill. Well, the trees went into instant shock and all the leaves fell off. So they had to pay the union guys to actually glue leaves on the branches of these trees.
Oh,
they spent all their money doing that. So then they had to hire some local people to do the rest of the work.
The IATSE guys are out there gluing leaves on trees.
That was great.
Where in a quarter office is saying, look, can't we just mat it in? No, the unions. Got to call this guy in South Hadley. Anyway, more importantly, you've also put, and how much of this you want to talk about, because I know it's in the works, is up to you, but you put a trademark on a symbol for the millennium?
Actually, it's called the symbol of a new generation, and there's a huge bandwagon of people that have decided to capitalize on the millennium. Everybody's got some sort of push towards the new millennium, and I looked at that and saw that somebody had trademarked the date, January 1, 2000, 01-01-00. As a businessman, I thought, that's brilliant. As an artist, I said, this guy, he just trademarked a date.
Right.
I didn't even think he could do that.
I didn't either, but what he did is he turned the slashes into dashes. And he made $175 million as of July in licensed agreements.
I guess you can do it then.
Yes.
Yeah, apparently.
He's currently up to about $260 million. But
Yeah,
anyway,
right.
I was working on another project with a partner in California and creating a logo for a script called TM2K, Time Machine 2000. And part of the symbol had a 2K very artistically done. It represented the year 2000. And we got to thinking we might be on to something here. So what we did was we started looking for people to, like attorneys, to trademark it. Ran into a lot of difficulty, people promising and not delivering. So I became my own trademark attorney. I went and trademarked it myself. I got about 10 different categories, international classes categories trademarked, and we're actively seeking licensees to represent an entire generation of people.
Wow.
Generation X, my generation, is fading out, turning 18 and graduating from high school in the year 2000. There's another generation coming up behind them that nobody was really paying much attention to, and trademarked it as a symbol of a new generation, and represents the year 2000, represents the millennium, but it is tailor-made for this next generation of people.
This is amazing stuff. Now, the symbol, it's used in what two languages?
It's language independent.
It is.
Any language. It looks like a Roman numeral 2 with a modified letter K. So it's not actually any specific language. It's a symbol.
And you're hoping that this will be the international way in which we will denote the new generation, the new century.
The replacement for the X, typically associated with my generation.
Well, folks, when this becomes common knowledge out there, you'll know where it began with Rob Skiba in South Hadley. We wish you a lot of luck on this venture, and let us know.
Rob, let me ask you one thing.
Long, hard battle.
So how are you marketing this? I mean, are you going to market it to companies, to people,
yes, right now we're seeking investors to help come on board to help pay for some advertising and some major licensing trade publications. Once we get some of that behind us, we're also doing a lot on our own. We're sending out to specific companies that we have done research on that have been known to be the #1 in their industry, their product industry, to come on board as licensees, because then the children or the next generation of people will benefit from the superior products and services that these companies who license our logo will have.
So if we see a commercial in the next year or so, next 8 months, let's say, that's going to promote the millennium, it could possibly, if there's some kind of symbol on the commercial, we can go, hey, that could be Rob's.
Yeah, it could be.
Rob, thank you for being with us. We wish you good luck on your venture, and let us know how it pans out.
My thinking was, I'm Generation X, right? I assume you probably are too.
I am.
So what's the next generation? Well, at that time they were calling the next generation Generation Y. Well, generations aren't labeled for the alphabet. we were called, I mean, you had the greatest generation, World War II. You had the baby boomers, and then you had Generation X. So the reason they called us Generation X is because we were the 13th American generation. We were right in the middle of, Vietnam and Kent State shootings and, JFK, all this crazy stuff happening in the 60s. And they basically thought, what hope does this generation have? We were like the nothing generation.
Right.
So X, like whatever, but by the 80s, the X had become a brand. You had X Games and X this and X Men and X everything, marketed toward. It's like we were the first generation to be labeled and marketed, and so I thought, well, I could carry that forward into the next generation. So I put this whole campaign together. I raised something like $80,000 in a very short period of time.
Wow.
I created a corporation and had investors, and I had a Korean manufacturer that came on board that wanted to be my official manufacturer. They said, forget licensing, man. You've got the next Nike here, And, next thing you know, I'm doing trade shows at the Jacob Javits Center in New York City. My booth is right between the World Wrestling Federation and Paramount Pictures. Like literally, Paramount and World Wrestling Federation, and Rob Skiba right in the middle with 2K,
Wow.
And I went down this crazy, fast-paced journey that was looking like this is headed for the stars, man. I was working on a $30 million contract with Will Smith, who had just put out an album, Will 2K, the Millennium. And I was pitching him to use my logo for his concert tours and stuff like that. And now, let me be clear, I never actually met Will Smith. I was working with a guy that I met through some other guys, these Korean manufacturers that I came in contact with as a result of that trade show that I did in the Jacob Javits Center in New York. They knew a guy named, I think his name was Sherwood Herndon, and he somehow knew James Lasseter, who apparently was Will Smith's manager. So he was my contact person, and I did actually speak. I believe I spoke with James Lasseter once when I was supposed to have a meeting with him and Will Smith at a restaurant in New York City. And at this time, I was doing a lot of traveling back and forth from Massachusetts to New York City. It seemed like, at least once a week, it seemed. And just networking. I mean, I didn't know anybody. I wasn't in the in crowd. I wasn't in the industry. So it's not like I had any connections to any celebrities or anything like that. I was just, who do you know? Playing the 6 degrees of separation deal, right?
Right.
And so I met this guy, Sherwood Herndon, who hooked me up with James Lasseter, who I guess was Will Smith's manager or something like that. And I was supposed to have a meeting with them to pitch everything that I was suggesting that could be a perfect fit for what they were doing as well as what I was doing. And so when I say it was a $30 million contract, that was what was when I put together the business plan. That's basically what it looked like it was going to come out to in sales and all kinds of stuff, ancillary products and whatnot that would go along with his tour, but also help me as a celebrity endorsement to put forward everything that I was trying to do. So it would be a mutually beneficial relationship. And it looked like the projected income from that would be about $30 million. And so I was supposed to have a dinner meeting with them, and I go to New York to wait on that call, and I got the call. I believe it was James Lasseter that called me and said, "Hey, listen, we're tied up. Something went wrong at Radio City Music Hall, so can we take a rain check?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Listen, if you're ever out in LA, come look us up. I'd be happy to talk with you." So that was that. But then, so I didn't get to go to meet with them, but in the office right next door to the Korean guys that I was working with, there was this guy just sitting there. I happened to just walk by this office. There's a little hole in the wall, barely the size of a closet, this guy's office. But it was full of pictures of hand-drawn pictures that this guy had done of soldiers from all different eras, from, Napoleon era, Revolutionary War era, Civil War era, World War I, World War II, everything. And I'm like, what? And this is amazing. And the guy was very artistic, extremely talented. And I was working on another project, which I'll tell you about in a second here, a flag project that was geared towards helping veterans. And so I'm like, wow, and I made a connection with this guy and asked him if he could draw me a picture of soldiers from each of the primary, dominant wars of the 20th century. And he's like, yeah, sure. So he whips a picture out for me. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But anyway, so I'm working on all this stuff with the Will Smith thing. Then a buddy of mine that I grew up with and we joined the Army together, he saw what was happening with my 2K project. And he's like, well, I should come up with something. So he took the stars in the American flag, the 50 stars, and he rearranged the star fields so it had like a ring of stars and kind of like a starburst pattern, and put the number 2000 in the middle as in a colonial style font. And he showed it to me. He's like, "What do you think of this?" I'm like, "Dude, that's awesome. That is beautiful." It's like the bicentennial flags, if you remember, in 1770.
I do.
1976. Well, he kind of took that idea and turned it into a millennium flag. And I said, okay, he asked if I would be the project manager on it. I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. Learning from what I did from the previous project. So we trademarked that as the official patriotic millennium flag. And same thing, man, people were throwing money at us and we're doing trade shows and, wow, this is amazing.
Two local businessmen are planning to celebrate year 2000 with a patriotic salute to America. The pair has created the Millennium Flag. Look at that, a red, white, and blue tribute to the end of an era and the beginning of another. The Millennium Flag is similar to one created more than 20 years ago for the nation's bicentennial.
Americans are very patriotic in times of war. So we thought, well, what if we could get that same kind of patriotism without starting a war and celebrate the American spirit as we go into this bold new era.
And we are told that 5% of all sales from the Millennium Flag will go to veterans organizations. This is the box it comes in. And it's from New Frontier Company in Chicopee. 5% to veterans organizations sounds like a real good deal.
Pretty nice. Hope we can see him flying all over Western Massachusetts.
And Tom Hanks, my mother found an article in Reader's Digest that showed Tom Hanks, and he had just done Saving Private Ryan. And HBO was about to put out the Band of Brothers miniseries.
I remember that.
And he basically had a sales pitch saying, hey, you know what? There is no memorial in Washington, D.C. for World War II, if you could believe that. I mean, you had like the Marines memorial, but there wasn't like an official memorial for World War II. So he's like, hey, let's make this happen. And Senator Bob Dole came on board as sort of a congressional spokesperson for the deal. And they needed to raise $100 million. They had 80, but they stalled out. They needed 20 more, and they just couldn't get any further. And I turned to my buddy. I'm like, dude, we've got the perfect fundraiser here. I mean, we sold 400 flags in Chicopee, Massachusetts by just waving it on the roof of my video production office on the corner of James Street and Memorial Drive. If you remember, there was a strip mall plaza there, and I had a video production office there. And we just put the flag on the roof, and people driving by, going around the rotary there on Memorial Drive, saw it, and I'm like, wow, what is that? It came in 400 flags just flying it on the roof. I said, dude, if we could sell, I'm like, if we could sell 400 flags in Chicopee, Massachusetts without advertising, if this goes national, it's going to be huge. So I put together a 26-page proposal, got on a plane, didn't know anything, didn't know anybody, just went out to LA. I'm like, I got to find Tom Hanks. And I don't even drink coffee, but I know that's where you meet people. So it wasn't a Starbucks, but it was a coffee-like place like Starbucks on Sunset Boulevard. And I'm just networking. I'm just talking with people. And somebody overheard me saying that I was trying to get a hold of Tom Hanks. He goes, "You're trying to get to Tom Hanks?" I said, "Yeah." He says, well, he goes to my church. He's Greek Orthodox. And he says, he's like best friends with the priest. And, come with me to church this weekend and I'll introduce you to the priest. I said, okay. So I went to church with this guy. I afterwards was introduced to the priest, showed him what I was trying to do. He says, wow, this is exactly what Tom's been looking for. But he was shooting Castaway at the time, so he wasn't even in town. So they said, tell you what, can I take this package? I said, yeah. So I think he gave it to Rita Wilson, his wife, who took it to Playtone, his production company. And the next day I get a phone call from an attorney in Washington, D.C. saying, hey, FedEx a copy of this to me like right away. So it's like, here I go from the East Coast to West Coast just to mail it back to the East Coast, but whatever, okay. So I send it, and it turns out that this is the attorney for Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, for somehow affiliated with them and the HBO miniseries that was about to come out, Band of Brothers. So, this guy is telling me that, yeah, everything looks good. And listen, you're going to be in a room with Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, and myself. And we're going to, I'm freaking out like, what? And, I'm going to be having this meeting, and basically all I needed to do after everybody agreed on all the paperwork was get the signatures. And I had two manufacturers, I had three manufacturers, two in the United States and one in Canada, that were flag manufacturers on standby. And they were telling me, yeah, listen, you know, because it was, the plan called for the making of 2 million flags, and pretty quickly. And they're like, yeah, we can do it. And we'll be willing to do it without any money up front if you actually can present the documents that shows that, you know, I've got the backing of people like, you know, Tom Hanks and Spielberg and everything, you know, that everything that I'm saying on my end is true. Then they would go ahead and, on faith, put those out, and we'll pay them, you know, on the other side of it. And so when I say $70 million contract, basically what that meant was we're going to sell 2 million flags at $35 a piece. So it was $70 million. So 20 million would go to the manufacturing of those flags, and pay for the manufacturing of it. Another 20 million would go towards the balance of what they were trying to raise for the World War II memorial. And that left 30 million to split between Tom Hanks, the attorneys, and me and my buddy. And again, the Will Smith deal was looking like it was going to be about a $30 million contract with, you know, obviously expenses and everything incorporated in that. So I was still looking at making, you know, several million on my end easily. But I put that on hold because, you know, that was only a $30 million contract. Now I'm working on a $70 million contract, right? So, and because I didn't meet with those guys in New York, I figured, well, next time I go out to California, if I have to go out there to do anything else with the flag project and Tom Hanks, then while I'm in LA, I will go ahead and meet with Will Smith again. And so, you know, I'm thinking temporarily putting the 30 million on hold to work on the 70 million, but collectively that's $100 million, you know. And this was like a done deal, man. I mean, it was like the perfect everything. And I had a sales pitch, was basically, hey, the price of freedom has been paid. It's time we say thank you. Here's an official patriotic millennium flag. A percentage of the proceeds goes towards building the World War II memorial. It was a perfect storm, man. And I put all my eggs in that basket, dude. I mean, like, everything went on hold for that. And my buddy Mike, same thing. You know, he, if I remember right, he quit his job, and because I was working on this full time. That's why he wanted me to be the project manager, because I had the time to do it. And as things started to develop, and I'm doing all this stuff myself, he's like, you know what, I'm going to go in all in too. So he quit his job, and he was, you know, working in as much faith as I was. And so, you know, we both had everything at stake at this point on this project. Then on the anniversary of Normandy, the ABC News ran a special report about World War II or whatever. And some rich guy in the country saw the report and couldn't believe there was no memorial for World War II. So he wrote a check that night for $14 million. And I just remember Bob Dole getting on television and saying, come on, Congress, let's get the other 6 and get this over with. And I turned to my now ex-wife and said, we just filed for bankruptcy. And yeah, it was this explosion from hell where lost my business, lost my house. My wife takes off with some other guy. And oh my God, it was, I basically ended up broke, homeless, divorced, bankrupt, and living in a Dodge Stratus with everything I owned in it, ready to put a bullet in my head.
The American dream.
Yeah, that's the American nightmare anyway for my buddy and I. It was just as bad for him too. And both of us lost the business. We both lost our houses. Both of our wives took off with other guys. In his case, she left him for one of our buddies that we used to be with in the Army. I mean, he was one of the Army guys that we hung out with. She left him for this other guy. And took his kids. So I didn't have any kids in the situation. So that just compounded the problem for Mike. Is, you know, we both lost everything, and I think he filed for bankruptcy too, or maybe I think he had to lose the house in order so he didn't file for bankruptcy. I don't remember exactly what happened, but long story short, we both lost everything. And you know, he lost his kids. His wife takes off. My wife takes off later, and then it turned out his wife that left him for one of our Army buddies committed suicide. So I mean, it was just, whew, man, what a terrible season that was. And you know, all this time, oh, and there's another thing that was going on at the same time while I was doing all of this. In I want to say 96, I got this idea for a script that eventually became known as the Omega Conspiracy. and it dealt with the idea of cloning Jesus from the blood on the Shroud of Turin. And so that was from like 96, 97. I was doing a ton of research on DNA and cloning and things of that nature, which was all sort of the precursor to the Nephilim research that I did much later. But I had like 1,000 pages worth of printed research that I had pulled off the internet and other sources just on that project alone. And while I was doing all that stuff and making trips back and forth to New York and going to California, I was also writing the script. And, you know, you got a lot of time sitting in planes and trains, right? So, you know, I'd be writing, and when I did it, I went to a pitch festival where I was out pitching my movie script to various movie studios. And Lighthouse Productions, I think, was had something to do with the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They were interested in optioning my script, but I needed to do a rewrite. So right when I finished the rewrite, and this is at the tail end of the Tom Hanks deal falling apart and filing bankruptcy and losing the business, that's when my wife says, you know what, I want out. I'm filing for divorce. And then I went away on a 6-day business trip, and when I came back, the house was empty, and she's out sleeping with some guy up in Maine that I found out about the hard way. So that was my crucible. You know, that's all a big part of who I am today. And yes, I have, looking back at these things, I've achieved many things, but there was one word that I would use to define myself, especially at that time, and that word was failure. I felt like a failure as a friend to those that got involved and invested. There was a lot of people that invested in these projects, and most of them were friends and family. I've gone from one enormous failure to another after barely, I mean, I could get to where I could touch unbelievable success, like just barely touch it, and then all gone. So failure. I felt like I let a lot of people down, family members, friends, investors. And even though the bankruptcy wiped my responsibility for all of that clean, I still carry the weight. I mean, that's an enormous weight to carry. And to some degree, I still carry it. And whenever I'm actually in a position of success, when I'm bringing in the kind of income that level of success can bring, my heart, even though I don't legally need to do so anymore, is to pay these people back. And if I'm able to, I'm going to. But yeah, I mean, I felt like a failure as a businessman, a failure as a friend, as a family member, a disappointment, certainly a failure as a husband. Felt pretty much worthless. And so that's what contributed to me wanting to just put a bullet in my head. I mean, it wasn't just the bankruptcy. And all that money that I was trying to raise was a means to an end. I want to make movies. And so, but I looked at what was going on in the movie industry, and I saw something that George Lucas had said, because he wanted to maintain total creative control over his franchise, you know, what became a franchise, Star Wars. Star Wars is an independent feature film. He took the proceeds that he earned from Star Wars and rolled it over into Empire Strikes Back. And, you know, he's by far the most successful independent filmmaker out there. But he's like, you know, whenever you're talking lots of money, you're also talking about lots of control, because the people who write those checks also want to have an input in whatever it is that you're doing. And so they start changing things and wanting to rewrite characters or plot lines or what have you. And he's like, no, you know, I got a vision. I want to stay true to my vision. And I've got a vision myself, and I want to stay true to my vision. And the borrower is slave to lender. So if I go the route of asking for lots of money, you know, to make a TV series or a movie, then I'm in the same situation most people are in, where somebody else can have the control over you. And so my thinking was, whatever I'm going to do to achieve my goal of being a filmmaker, is I have to do it. I have to be able to do it myself, which means I have to have the money to do it myself. So all these projects were designed to be a means to that end, but also my heart has always been to help people. So I thought, well, yeah, great. If I can make this kind of money, and at the same time, in the case of the 2K project, help kids, a portion of all of the proceeds from the 2K project was designed to go directly towards orphanages and, you know, various kid ministries and nonprofits and whatnot that help children. And then everything with the Flag Project was designed to help veterans. And my buddy Mike and I had already contributed money from the proceeds that we got from selling the flags in Chicopee to the Holyoke Soldiers Home. So we were already doing what we said we were going to do, but then it all fell apart.
Wow.
So after all the dust settled and there was nothing left, my uncle, who lived down here in Texas, told my mother about a scripture-based self-help program called the Road Adventure that he had gone through, and it helped him. He was going through similar problems in his life, and the program really, that and divorce care and Celebrate Recovery, different programs like that really helped him. And so I didn't have any money, and he told my mom, hey, listen, whatever it takes, Rob's got to go to this thing, because I was a mess, man.
When I read Hosea chapter 4 in preparation for this presentation, it was one of those moments where I just started crying again. Because you read Hosea 4, then the Lord said to me, go and love your wife again. He's talking to the prophet who had married a prostitute, right? Even though she commits adultery with another lover. This will illustrate that the Lord still loves Israel. The reason why this... I'm getting choked up again. The reason why this impacted me so much is because my previous marriage was broken up because of adultery. My wife had cheated with somebody else. And, Proverbs talks about, woe to the man when the husband finds out, because, he's going to go off on him. I was claiming all the Proverbs and stuff, wanting to go off on this guy. And, of course, Yeshua is saying, I got to love my enemies and pray for my enemies and all that. So I'm like, And have anybody, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but has anybody else experienced infidelity in marriage? Short of crucifixion or a terminal disease, I couldn't think of anything more painful. Because when two come together and become one, that flesh has been rent and to your core. And it's not just your own life, it's like everybody around you, because the whole family's split up and everything's jacked up and it's like this, you drop a boulder in a, calm lake and this ripple effects just go out. And, for the longest time, there was so much anger and there's so much bitterness. But how many of you know that forgiveness is not for the one who offended you, but it's for you? Not forgiving somebody else is like drinking poison and expecting them to get sick. And somebody had to illustrate that to me because I couldn't get through this forgiveness and this program that I was going to. And they were trying to teach me, look, Rob, forgiveness is for you. It's not for that person. It's for you. Because I was like, they don't deserve my forgiveness. And I said, okay, Rob, fine. Grab your chair and go hold it and stand in the corner. I'm like, fine, whatever. And grab my chair and I'm over there in the corner. And I'm holding my chair, and they worked with each, we had 5 people in a small group, and each person takes about 45 minutes to work through stuff. So they went through the other 4 people, and then they came to me. I'm still holding the stupid chair. I'm putting it on my head, I'm holding it on my knee, I'm compensating, because now my arms are shaking, all my muscles are burning, and they're like, why are you still holding your chair? I'm like, because you told me to! And then the dude's like, do your muscles hurt? I'm like, yeah. Are they stinging? And they're shaking. I'm like, yeah. He says, well, what do you think all that unforgiveness is doing in your heart? He's like, it's burning you up, man. It's killing you. Drop the chair, yeah. I said, yeah, man, I get it, but I still can't go there. Well, I eventually got there to the point where I understood what they were trying to tell me. But the way it happened was I had flown down from Massachusetts to Texas to attend that seminar, went back to Massachusetts, and there was a break between parts 1 and part 2. It was a 3-weekend deal. And they said, you're going to experience speed bumps along the way, a chance to practice your tools, right? So I was at a fair, 140,000 people at this fair, and I walk in the subway to buy a sandwich, and I walk out, and then boom, right into, it was my ex-wife. And it blows up into this huge fight right there in the middle of the fairground, right? And all I could think of in the middle of that fight was that stupid chair. So I said, look, stop, just stop. I grabbed her hand and I swallowed every pride I had and everything, and I just said, look, I forgive you. And she says, for what? I didn't do anything wrong. Forgiveness is for me, forgiveness is for me. I'm going to go get my chair now. That's when it proved to me that it's not for the other person. Because how many of you know the people that hurt you, they're off doing their own thing. They've long forgotten about it. They don't care. You not forgiving people, if come on up here for a second. How much do you weigh? 215. Okay. If David is the guy that offended me, right, and I don't forgive him, it's like I start my day off by taking a shower, getting dressed and everything, and then I strap David on me, and I'm going to go for I'm going to go for a walk with David on my back, right? How far am I going to get carrying 200 pounds? Thank you. He's like, I don't want to say how much I weigh. Sorry, brother. It's a feast of Sukkot, man. But some of us have several people strapped to our backs. You got to let it go. I know how hard it was for me to forgive those that hurt me. I remember. I'm never going to forget it, how hard it was. How hard was it for Yeshua to forgive you, to forgive us? Right? Yahuwah sent his only begotten son, right, to go through that so that I could have a relationship with him again. I'm looking at this. He says, this will illustrate that the Lord still loves his whoring bride that's out there. And for the longest time, I had so much anger and bitterness, and finally I had to get to the place where, forgiveness, Peter says, how many times must I forgive my brother? 7 times? Is that cool? 70 times. He's counting. Well, I did it 7 times. 70 times 70. I don't think the rule is 490 times. I think it's as many times as it takes. It may be 490 times an hour. But you do it until you have peace. Peace is the byproduct of forgiveness. It's the result of forgiveness. And you've arrived when you can talk. I can joke about the situation. I don't get all angry. It's a page in my history. But all the anger, the bitterness, the pain is gone. You've reached forgiveness when you have that peace. When you read through the prophets, you see that God doesn't have that peace yet. He wants that peace. He wants that forgiveness. He wants to bring his bride back, but he's hurt. All through the prophets you see that. Until he finally sends his son to go through what he goes through. And Yeshua, obedient even unto death, went through. Have you seen the Passion of the Christ? I think Mel came close to depicting what it was really like.
It was so bad that when he got on the cross, it was a relief.
She said it was so bad that when he got on the cross, it was a relief. That's how bad he needed forgiveness with us. When I heard the rule that forgiveness is not for the one who offends, but for the one who is offended, and when I understood it for myself, man, that caused me a whole paradigm shift in my brain, because in our relationship with God, who is the offender and who is the offended? What are we? We're the offender. Well, if the rule is that forgiveness is for the offended, who's the offended in our relationship with God? He is. But we're all taught we got to beg and grovel for forgiveness, right? And I do believe we need to ask for forgiveness, but that's called reconciliation. Isaiah 43:25 became my new favorite verse, because when I thought about that, because I grew up in a legalistic environment but it was not like Torah legalism. It was like your hair is too long, your hair is touching your collar, your shorts, need to be so high above your knees, and you're sitting too close to a girl, and you're listening to rock music. Got to burn your albums. We're having an album burning ceremony tonight. And you're listening to Christian rock. That's even worse. That's the kind of legalism that I grew up with. So I literally woke up every morning begging God for forgiveness for everything I did yesterday so I could get through today without getting whacked. That was my belief system. Until I started to understand grace, because I believe that you can't have one without the other. Law without grace is tyranny. Grace without law is anarchy. They have to go together. Right? Well, when I understood that forgiveness is for him because he needed peace, the gerbil jumped off the wheel. I don't get it, because it was running real hard to try to figure that one out. Until I turned to Isaiah 43:25, where God is speaking. He says, I, yes, I alone am the one who forgives your sins for my own sake, and I will never again remember them. Wow. All of a sudden, the most important word in John 3:16 for me became the word so. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son. Because he needed forgiveness that bad and wanted reconciliation that bad. Now, think about this. If you've forgiven the people that have hurt you in your life and you have that peace, and then one day they knock on the door or they call you up and in sincerity, crying and weeping because they finally understood how much pain they caused you, they contact you and said, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? Well, you've already done it. How much sweeter would that peace that you already have be when reconciliation is sought? Right? That's what I think is going on. I think he got that peace with me 2,000 years ago. But then when I acknowledged it and asked for it, I'm calling him up saying, wow, God, thank you for loving a sinner like me. Fill me with your Holy Spirit and help me to walk in it so that I don't continue to hurt you. Right? Hosea is an amazing book. When I was going through some of the worst parts of the divorce and everything, God was putting homeless people in front of me everywhere I went. Like I was seeing them, and I was unemployed. I was, going through bankruptcy, and it was a rough. I came to Texas, broke, homeless, divorced, bankrupt, and living in a Dodge Stratus with everything I owned in it, ready to put a bullet in my head in 2003. That's where I was. But prior to that, ending up in that situation, I was seeing homeless people all over the place, and I finally got a job, finally got some money in my pocket, and God was telling me to give it away every time I saw somebody. And I was headed to the post office to run an errand, and I saw this guy standing there, and I just got my first paycheck in forever, and God said, give it to him. I'm like, hey. I said, all right, Father, well, I don't want to just enable somebody, so if this guy's legitimate and really needs it, let him still be there when I come out of the post office. And, if he's just a peddler looking for drugs or whatever, wants money for drugs, have him walk off. So I did my thing. I came out. He's still there. I saw him. I said, why don't you come in? It was a hot day. Come sit with me in the car. I was in a van. He sat in the van with me. And I said, what's your story? And he started to tell me his story. And as he told me his story, it was my story. He was telling me, I'm like, and I start crying. He's like, what's the matter? I said, well, you're where I'm about to be. And he says, you need to read the book of Hosea. I'm thinking, what? That's like Habakkuk. I mean, like, who reads those, right? That's why I was at that, because we were New Testament Bible believing Christians, Hosea. And this guy preaches to me for half an hour. And I'm like, wow, man. So we're both crying, we're both praying. And I gave him the money and sent him on his way. And then I was sitting in the van just weeping again. And then I look out and he's not there. I'm thinking, oh boy, did I just entertain an angel unaware here? What's going on? Turns out about 2 years later, he calls me. He wasn't an angel. He turned out to start a homeless ministry and was doing a whole thing. And he called me 2 years later to tell me that the seed that I sowed had what it had done. And I have to believe that when God does stuff like that, you're sowing seed for something, that you reap what you sow. When he was putting homeless people in front of me that whole season, it was because I was about to become homeless. And then when I was homeless, people did for me what I had done for the people before that. But he had me digging into Hosea to understand, how God feels. And I was too wrapped up in my own pain at that time to really see what was going on. But then, Kevin, when you went through the book of Hosea, man, it was like all coming back. Everything from 2002 and 2003. And I'm looking at that and just sitting in my office the day before coming here, it's so powerful. even though the people have turned to their gods and love to worship them. He says, this will prove that the Lord still loves Israel, even though they're still doing that. So I bought her back for 15 pieces of silver and 5 bushels of barley and a measure of wine. Then I said to her, you must live in my house for many days and stop your prostitution. During this time, you will not have sexual relations with anyone, not even with me. This shows that Israel will go a long time without a king or prince and without sacrifices, sacred pillars, priests, or even idols. But afterward, the people will return and devote themselves to the Lord their God and to David's descendant, their king. In the last days, they will tremble in awe of the Lord and his goodness. How many of you think we're in the last days? I'm in awe of his goodness. And that I even have any understanding of any of this right now. I don't know how much time we have left. I think we have about 19 more years. Sandy Bruce thinks we have 2 or 3 more years. I don't know how much more time we have. But I was lost, man, even though I thought I was a Christian. And that scripture where Jesus says, there will be many will come to me in that day and say, Lord, did we do this? Did we do that? And he says, depart from me. I never knew you. He says, depart from me, you workers of iniquity, lawlessness. Growing up a Baptist, we didn't, in the church that I was in, didn't believe in the gifts of the Spirit, that they had passed away with the apostles, cessation, another bogus doctrine. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. What was I saying before that?
Workers of iniquity.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Growing up a Baptist, they always said that's the Pentecostals he's talking about right there. Because see, didn't we do miracles? Didn't we do all these things in your name? Well, Baptists, we don't do the miracle stuff. We just read the book. So see, they think they, Lord, Lord, didn't we do this? Didn't we do miracles in your name? Well, and they're going to, because they were wrong, because tongues and healing and prophecy and all that's of the devil now, apparently. How screwed up is that? No, it says, these people thought that they knew who he was, and he says, I never, that's another marriage term. That's intimacy. So-and-so knew his wife, This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. His commandments are not burdensome. 5th grade reading level English. So if we're not doing that, are we really loving him? I don't think so. I'm trembling in awe of the Lord's goodness.
So it was a 3-weekend deal. He flew me from Massachusetts down to Texas for the first 2. And by December 18th of 2002, I was living in a tar pit, man. I mean, it was killing me living there in Massachusetts. So, my ex-wife, her boyfriend set up a new business for her right across the street from my parents' house. Because when I lost my house, I moved in with my parents, and then every morning I'd wake up and I'm like, "How long do the wicked prosper, Lord?" kind of thing. As I'm looking at her, new business right there in front of my parents' house, it was killing me. So, got in the car, went to Texas with the intention of going to part 3. Had no idea what I was going to do from there. My intention actually was to finish the program and then go to California and go make movies. I'm figuring I'm already halfway to the true Hollywood story, right? I'm living in a van down by the river,
Right.
living in a Dodge Stratus with everything on it. But every time I tried to leave the Metroplex, it was like I hit a force field, man. It was like I knew God was withholding. He was not letting me leave the Metroplex. And finally I just threw my arms up and said, okay, fine. What do you want? And, he set me up with, I finally got a freelance job, got an apartment and different things. And 2003 was probably the most difficult year of my life. At the same time, it was the best year of my life. Wouldn't want to repeat it, but am forever grateful for it.
Right.
And
I know exactly what you're saying.
In that season, God put this seriously broken man back together again, and I was applying for jobs that had my picture on the job description. We want Rob Skiba. I show up and they're like, "Oh, you're overqualified," and I couldn't get hired to save my life. I mean, the only job I had was a freelance job that worked long enough for me to get an apartment. And then the guy who hired me, his son graduated from college, so he gave my job to him. And I was like, Oh, great.
Awesome.
So here I got a new apartment, and my car broke down, so I ended up getting a new used car, and then I lost my freelance job and had no way to pay for any of it. And I'm like, will this never end? You know,
it just keeps coming.
It just keeps coming. And I was applying for jobs left and right, and nothing was working. And so finally I said, God, I know it's not because I'm not trying. I mean, I'm doing everything I can to get hired. You're stopping me. You stopped me from leaving this state, and you're stopping me from getting a job. I'm like, and I said, you're going to have to provide for me, man. And he said, well, then you're going to have to spend time with me. I said, deal. And 2003 from March to December was basically consists of me crying a lot, praying a lot, and reading my Bible. And that's about it in my apartment. But what a season that was. And in August of 2003, I laid my dream down of all I ever wanted to do is make movies and TV shows and stuff like that. It was like, since I saw Star Wars at age 7, that was it. That was what I wanted to do.
And after seeing it 12 more times in the theater the first year it came out, I knew exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Well, sort of. See, I figured I'd either be an astronaut, a movie star, a filmmaker, or dead by the time I was 30. It's not that I had a death wish. See, I just always had big dreams, and I figured if I hadn't achieved those goals by the time I was 30, it was because I was dead. So I had to get busy right away. I joined the Army right out of high school so I could learn how to fly helicopters so I can go into the space program, but the space program never happened, so I acted all over the country. I even modeled a little. I went to film school. I shot weddings. I started my own business. I learned a lot and did all sorts of cool things until the Lord finally declared, "It is finished." And then
the storms came.
Why? Because like Frank Sinatra, I did it my way.
And in August, I said, I don't care anymore. I've chased this my whole life. It's yours. I'll do whatever you want me to do. That was August of 03. January of 04, I got hired as a multimedia director for an international missions organization and ended up traveling the world, went to about a dozen countries, making mini movies about what missionaries are doing. I'd get entrenched with the missionaries, do what they do, document it, and then come back, make videos that would create awareness for what they're doing to help them raise support. And, you know, I did that from January of 04 until toward the end of 2009. I got a tap on the shoulder, and I felt like the Lord was saying, hey, remember that dream you laid down in 03? Yeah. You want it back? No. He's like, why not? I said, because it hurt too much, man. He said, that's because you did it your way. What if we did it my way? I said, what does that mean? He said, what do you think we've been doing for the last 6 years? You know, when I would go into the foreign mission field, in the corporate world, when I did corporate video, we would interview the guy that wants the video. He would tell me what they want. We would script it out. We would storyboard it. We would shoot it with intent, have it edited within a day or two, you know, or you know, maybe 3 tops. Within a week, the whole project would be done, basically. In the mission field, it wasn't like that. They'd say, hey, we need a video for Albania. Okay, cool. What's it about? I don't know. Get on a plane. What? You know, so I go there and I just shoot everything, you know. But it was like, I would be like, okay, Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to get accomplished. You be the writer, director, producer. I'll be your camera guy. You just tell me what to shoot. And it was like crazy stuff. I mean, I'd be driving down the road and he'd be like, hey, look at that. Wow, this amazing shot, you know, to be the opening for the video later. But I would come back with 40 hours of raw footage that I would have to edit down to 7 relevant minutes, because that's all a missionary typically has time to show in a typical church. You know, you've seen the missionary come to your church and, you know, do his little flannel board or whatever, you know, overhead projector presentation is always pretty cheesy. So my job was to take that to the next level, and I joked about it. But basically, my commission was to make people cry and give money for the missionaries, you know. So I'd have to take those 40 hours and then find the story out of that, condense it to 7 minutes, put music to it that would make people cry, and, you know, the whole deal.
The country became officially atheist, where having any kind of faith was a prosecutable offense in 1967.
People cannot hear about God. You couldn't even mention the word God in public.
You could trust nobody.
There were no known Christians. But in 1991, Albania was open to gospel.
And I thought, God give me an opportunity to change the course of history for this small nation.
So I learned a lot in that process. And so when he said, what if we did it my way? I began to understand. I was like, okay, that's cool. And I asked for confirmation because he was telling me to leave my job, which was a good paying full-time job with benefits. I met my wife, my current wife, in the ministry. She was in the communications department with me. And I was very secure and very happy. And he's saying, step out in faith to an abyss of nothing but ideas scribbled on napkins for some TV show that I had in my head, you know. I'm like, Lord, you know, I don't know. You know, it was one thing being broke and going through that crucible in 2003 when I was alone in a 700 square foot apartment. But now I'm married and have an adopted son, and it's a different situation here. And he's like, look, do you trust me or not? I'm like, yeah, but man. And so he, through divine providence, sent me to the desert of Arizona in December of 2009, where I ended up spending 5 days alone with God out there in that desert. That was very much like a Moses, Abraham type experience. Wow. Where he did incredible things. And my typical writing pace when I'm doing creative writing, you know, fictional writing, is about 3 to 5 pages a day. When I came back from that trip, I wrote 17 pages and a half a day and outlined 72 episodes for a 6-season TV series. Wow. That wasn't me. You know what I mean? That was direct downloads, you know, like Matrix. And that's when I got real intentional. You know, it's a big, long story, but I'm just, you asked me my journey. So this is the journey.
Cool. It's cool.
This is the journey that led me into, it's like all those years before, I had, as a hobby, been researching the Nephilim, the giants, hybrids, you know, transhumanism, shadow people, pyramids, you name it, as a hobby. But when I got in this download for the script for the series for Seed, I got real intentional about doing the research. And so I'm like, man, you know, I got questions. You know, I want to talk to Steve Quayle and Tom Horn and L.A. Marzulli. I want to talk to these guys. Well, they're busy guys. I am now in the position that they were in when I was thinking about wanting, you know, people try to contact me all the time. I'm a hard person to get a hold of because I'm a very busy guy, right. You know? And now I understand why these guys weren't returning my phone calls and why my emails never were answered. Well, I get it now, you know? So then I thought, well, because I listened to them on radio shows all the time, and George Norrie and all these shows that these guys are on. I thought, well, why don't I create a radio show? And then I could contact whoever their, you know, gatekeepers are and say, hey, listen, I have a radio show. I'd like to talk about, you know, your latest book, Apollyon Rising or whatever. You know, if you're interested, contact me. And well, I mean, what author is not interested in promoting his book or DVD, right? All of a sudden, now these guys are calling me, and I created my radio show. This is the truth. I created my radio show just so that I could talk to these guys for 2 hours and pick their brain, you know, while promoting their book. And if you listen to my early shows, I listen to them now and I'm like, dude, shut up. Because I was just like doing all the talking. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like yelling at myself now, shut up, let the guest talk, you know. But that led to me, I ended up sharing the stage with these guys. I mean, I ended up somehow very quickly on the public speaking circuit doing huge, you know, conferences and thousands of people and stuff. But something happened a few years ago. Some of my research, these other guys in the in crowd, I call it now, won't touch. And for better or worse, like I said, if I'm passionate about something, I can't shut up about it. And I don't care if it's controversial. If it's something that I just want to know what the truth is, period. And that's a blanket statement. I want to know what the truth is.
Exactly.
So when I find what I think is the truth, I'm passionate about talking about it. And I found out very quickly that some things are very, let's say, not profitable from a business standpoint to talk about. And some of these guys, I don't want to say that they're all about the money. I'm not trying to insinuate that. However, I know that there are topics that they're not touching simply because they know that it can really hurt their business. And I'm a perfect example of it. There have been several times where I would get to a point where my book and DVD sales were going great. Everything's awesome, starting to finally make a decent income. And then I'd open my big mouth and say something controversial or whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, everything would take a nosedive. I would get, blacklisted and kicked out of conferences or whatever, not invited back, things like that. So, I understand that it can cost you to talk about certain subjects. And so some of these guys, they understand that, and they have better filters than I do, apparently, so they don't go there. Now my books, they came as a result of blogging. I blogged for 2011. Like if I woke up in the morning and had an idea or something, I just wrote about it. And by the end of 2011, I looked at my blogs and I thought, I wonder how much I wrote. So I pulled my blog format down into some print software and saw they had over 1,000 pages worth of content there. And I'm like, holy cow, I should make some books out of this. So my first book was Babylon Rising, and published in February 2012. And the first chapter of the first book was called The Genesis 6 Experiment. After I published that book, I realized I got to really unpack that first chapter. It was the shortest chapter in the book. So my second book was Archon Invasion, The Rise, Fall, and Return of the Nephilim, which became about a 366-page elaboration on chapter 1 of the first book. And as a result of that, I realized from taking cues from these other guys that, people like books, but they really like DVDs. And so if I could make DVDs from the conferences that I was doing that would complement the book, then, I could make a pretty decent living doing that. And it took a number of years, man. We were running lean and living from miracle to miracle from 2010 till probably 2014 or 15, so a good 4 or 5 years there. I was back in a 2003 mode where God's paying my bills, just miraculously crazy things happening,
Right.
But then, it was right around that time from 2013, Doug Hamp contacted me after we did a debate. We debated each other on the issue of multiple incursions of Nephilim and how they returned after the flood. We did a debate and it went really well. He enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. He contacted me after that conference and said, what do you think about starting a show based on the fact that we disagree on non-essential issues? We agree on the core essentials of our faith. Yeshua is the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except through him. Gift of grace, not of works, all that. We agree on the core essentials. Well, let's talk about the other stuff. Let's debate it. So we created a show called Quest for Truth. And that was awesome. But in that season, I began to come off of a page that I was on for my whole life, for the most part. And that is the pre-trib rapture. I used to be a hardcore dispensationalist, pre-trib rapture guy, hardcore.
I remember.
And when I came off that page, I got kicked to the curb hard. Oh, man. I mean, when I was in with the Prophecy in the News crowd, we had some of the, and Bob Ulrich was the project manager, sales guy, whatever, for Prophecy in the News. He was like, man, we sold $40,000 worth of my first 2 DVDs. I had Mythology and the Coming Great Deception and the Mount Hermon Roswell Connection, which they were sold separately, but also eventually became a double feature. So you get 2 in 1 package.
Well, our guest today is Rob Skiba. I met Rob recently at the Future Congress meeting, and I'll tell you what, he presented some information that people were talking about. They were in the halls between presentations. I heard Rob's name mentioned, and I met him there at Future Congress in Branson, Missouri. Rob, welcome to Prophecy in the News.
Thank you, Gary.
Good to have you here. You have produced a couple of DVDs, which we're going to be talking about. One is called Mythology and the Coming Great Deception. The other one is called the Mount Hermon Roswell Connection. And stay with us. We'll be talking about both of these DVDs. Rob, you feel, as I do, that it's high time for the church to wake up.
Yes.
We have the Christian church out there, and I'm not being hypercritical of the Christian church, but I want to say that church teaching, I think, falls short of the things that the Lord would have us to learn about in these last days. And I know, Rob, you feel the same way, right?
Yeah, very much so. I've always found that scripture extremely sobering, where it talks about a coming great deception to be so great that even the elect could be deceived by it if it were possible. And I didn't want to be in that category.
Now, we're going to go right back to the beginning. Let me start by reading Genesis 6, because really that's kind of the focal point of what we'll be talking about today, and it has to do with the things which are taught to young preachers today. Genesis 6:1, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took them wives of all they chose. Now, Rob, here we get into a big discussion.
Yeah.
Because a major part of the Christian church at large wants to make those sons of God ordinary human beings, and the women, of course, ordinary human wives. Yeah. But there's a faction of the church that's becoming increasingly sensitized to the fact that we're not talking about that at all, and that's where our discussion starts.
Yeah, for sure. And that's always frustrated me. I didn't go to seminary, but I've been in the church my whole life around theologians and served in the ministry for 6.5 years, and I'm aware that a lot of the seminaries do talk about what's known as the Sethite theory. Mm-hmm. And here I am, haven't been to seminary, and I can tell that the sons of God is a phrase that's used elsewhere, like in the book of Job, and those same scholars have no problem accepting the phrase in Job as angels, but when you get into Genesis, they don't want to accept that. And I just simply pose the question, well, if it's really just the sons and daughters of Cain and Seth, how do you produce Og of Bashan or Goliath? I mean, how does that happen? How do you get a 15-footer with kissing cousins?
Well, and of course, I didn't read the next verse, but I'll go ahead and do it because it uses the word giants. The Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his day shall be 120 years. Verse 4 says, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Mm-hmm. You know, the historian Flavius Josephus comments on these mighty men, and he says that they were the Titans.
Yeah.
Now, who are the Titans?
Well, and that's interesting that you should bring that up, because I started looking at some of the other myths that are out there, starting with the Sumerian myths, the Babylonian, the Egyptian myths, and of course the Greek myths that you just mentioned. And it's funny, reading Josephus, he didn't have much respect for the Greeks at all.
That's true.
You know, he's against Apion and some of those things. He's writing about how the Greeks were just basically rip-off artists, and they were, constantly embellishing facts and whatnot. And so I give their mythology the least amount of credibility when I'm looking at the mythologies. But I began to see the terms that the different groups were using, like the Anunnaki, or like the Titans, or the Olympians, and some of these things. And I began to try to look at these things from a biblical perspective, and I came to believe that the Titans are essentially what I would consider first-generation Nephilim.
The Nephilim, and from the Hebrew Naphal, which means to fall. Nephilim would be a plural cognomen, meaning the fallen ones, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, they were fallen angels. And I think there are a lot of people who have watched Prophecy in the News for years and been through a number of discussions on this subject. But I want to get specifically to mythology. That's the name of your DVD, Mythology and the Coming Great Deception. Rob, a lot of people look at quote-unquote Greek mythology, and they think of it as stories,
right?
Entertaining stories about fictional people. You don't take that view at all, do you?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Even in the Sumerian myths, predating all of that, I've got a book here, Myths of Mesopotamia, and even the scholars that look at the Sumerian epics and whatnot, they acknowledge that in ancient times they didn't have an in-flight movie when they went on a long journey.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they would do is hire one of the best orator, the best speaker that they could find to tell stories for the long journeys. And so what you find is a lot of the epics, especially the Sumerian epics in this case, were just embellishments on something that was true. So there was a kernel of truth in these things, but then depending on their audience and when and where they lived, they would embellish it, change it, and modify it as necessary. So it's basically the equivalent of Star Wars or Lord of the Rings in our day. You know, the way we quote movies, they were quoting various stories throughout the centuries, and of course the Greeks did the same thing. much later.
And it was a big part of their society. The
Yes.
amphitheaters, you know, the semicircular amphitheaters were places where those myths were recited.
Yes.
And people learned them almost by heart, and it became part of their religion, part of their belief system. They really did believe that there were demigods who came down to earth. For them, it was just a matter of, this is the truth, and we believe it. In fact, they would pay honor to those gods. They would bring tithes and offerings and pray for blessing and so forth and so on. And in some cases, the Greeks even believed those gods might come back someday.
Well, there's a friend of mine who wrote a book, and he suggests in his book that we should view the Bible from a mythological worldview, which on the surface sounds like a really strange thing to say, because as believers we look at everything from a biblical worldview.
Right.
But when I sat back and looked at what he was saying, I found that he's absolutely right, because when you look at the 66 books and you realize that when these documents were written, it was written in a day when people very much believed the Sumerian gods. They believed in the Babylonian gods, the Egyptian gods, and as you just said, the Greek gods. And you get the passages like in Acts where it says that they thought that Barnabas was Zeus and that Paul was Mercury, messenger of the gods. And you come to realize that, wow, if you look at the Bible from the mythological worldview, it really starts to come alive, because you see the context. You know, they say in real estate the key word is location, location, location. You know, in Bible study it's context, context, context. And so when you're looking at the Torah, for instance, and you realize that each of the 10 plagues of the Exodus were a direct assault against 10 different gods of Egypt. And you've got the 10 Commandments there, and you know, first one, thou shalt have no other gods before me.
Right.
You know, I think I've always just read past that, but then one day I looked at it and said, wait a minute, who are these other gods, and why is God so concerned about it? And I don't believe he's worried about it at all, but he's worried about it for our sake. And as we see throughout the scriptures, God's constantly, especially in the Old Testament, trying to call his people back to him, because as the scriptures say, they're out whoring after other gods. They're following other gods.
You know, one thing I like about your DVD, Mythology and the Coming Great Deception, is that you have a lot of documentation in it. That is to say, you go back and historically document a number of events that are recorded in secular history, and you draw comparisons between those and what the Bible says. And you make, I think, an excellent case for this whole hypothesis that the Bible is not just written out there in space. It is tied in to history and to the civilizations of the past.
Yeah, very much so. And I had the privilege in 2005 of going on 2 different trips in the same year. I went on the missionary journey of Paul on a sailing ship through the Greek Isles. So I went where Paul went, the way he went.
Wow.
And part of that, we got to go to Patmos also and see where John received the revelation. And then later the same year, we also got to go to Israel and do the footsteps of Jesus through the Holy Land. And so going in these locations, especially like in the Greek Isles and stuff, and seeing all of these temples and remnants of the old gods all over the place, it really helps you to put the scriptures in context again, where Paul is standing there next to, you know, when he's walking through the marketplace there, you know, you got the Acropolis off to there, and you got Mars Hill, and down in the marketplace, there are shrines to all these gods. And of course, Paul, you know, sees one. They even have one to the unknown God, so he's like, "Oh, I'll work with that one," you know. And so, but to actually stand in those locations and put yourself in the mindset of the people like Paul, in this case, it's very eye-opening, and you really realize that, wow, we are taught these things as myth in school, as you say, just fancy stories. But you realize there is truth in there, that at least people of those days, they believed it as truth.
Now, for the second part of the title here, The Coming Great Deception. What is the Coming Great Deception from your perspective?
Well, it really deals with Nimrod, largely. But it also ties in things like the Anunnaki. You've got the History Channel and the Ancient Aliens series are in season 3 now. They've got two seasons complete, and they're in the 3rd season now. And they're always talking about Eric von Daniken's book and Sitchin and some of these other guys that are talking about the return of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven came, you know, these gods of antiquity, coming back. And what I came to realize, and I appreciate L.A.'s book, The Cosmic Chess Match, talking about move and counter move. The God makes a move and the devil makes a move. And you see that it appears to me that he started to set things in motion thousands of years ago for a payoff, I believe, in our day. And so as we're seeing a rapid increase of UFO sightings, you start to realize, what's going to happen when it used to sound crazy to say a mile-wide spaceship parking over a city until you realize one parked over Stephenville, Texas in 2008.
As a matter of fact, that was pretty well documented in the
was.
news. I was surprised that most of the news media picked that one up. Stephenville, Texas is southwest of Fort Worth, out in a little bit out in the country. And a gentleman, there had been a wave of sightings in that area. A gentleman essentially went out in his backyard and discovered the whole sky was covered by one of these things. Huge. And he's not the only one who's seen a huge vehicle.
Well, I started thinking about that, and as you say, usually I joke about it, but it used to be like in the 70s and 80s, it used to be that guy that you could floss his teeth with rope, I got taken up in a spaceship,
Right,
some Yahoo that, nobody ever heard of.
Yeah.
But now, there are credible people, there are people, mayors and, government officials and, different people like that are seeing these things, and more so these days. I put together a little UFO montage for one of those DVDs, it's about 8 minutes long, showing UFO sightings over the last 8 years or so, well, actually the last 3 years. But just in the last 3 months, there have been almost as many sightings in the last 3 months as there have been in that little montage that I put up.
In your presentation, you document the fact that you believe that modern man, say man in the last 50 years, is being prepared for a modern unveiling of the ancient myths, sort of in new clothing. Tell us about that.
Well, we were talking about it last night, that you got all these commercials and stuff coming out right now. I think it was a Scion car commercials with Zeus, in the commercials, and Mother Earth and whatnot. And it's interesting, JR put out an article several months back in your magazine talking about how Mount Hermon was referred to as Mount Sion, S-I-O-N. And so you got this car, S-C-I-O-N, but it's pronounced the same way. And you've got these gods in these commercials. And come to realize that these ancient gods are all around us constantly, all over Washington, D.C., for one thing. All the different monuments and stuff are made after these guys. And, and so I began to think that when it talks about the Great Deception, every kid in school has to read the Greek myths. Every kid in public school is reading the Greek mythology.
Yeah.
They're not reading the Bible, but they're reading the Greek mythology. And just this morning, I saw Laura Bush on TV on the Today Show talking about the need for education. And she's sitting underneath a huge statue of a god. I believe it was Apollo with a zodiac going around him. This massive statue of the god, and the camera pulls way out, so you see the statue of the god and Laura Bush talking with this other, the interviewer. And she's talking about how we have to educate our kids. We have to educate our kids. And the camera's going in on her coming off of this Greek god. And I'm like, I believe that it's definitely going to be part of the Great Deception, for the devil to be constantly putting this in our face on a regular basis.
Well, we're talking to Rob Skiba. He has produced really a couple of DVDs. We're going to be talking about the first one today, and again, on another program, we're going to be talking about the second one, the Mount Hermon Roswell connection. Now, that's an interesting title in and of itself. And we're going to offer you these DVDs right now for $19.95 each. And believe me, you will be transfixed when you start to watch Rob's documentation. He's got a lot of fascinating connections. In fact, that's what I like about this, is that you have connected secular historical events to Bible texts in very specific ways, and it makes a very, very telling presentation that you need to share with your Christian friends, because the world is changing. And when I get back to talking with Rob in just a moment, we're going to talk about how the world is changing. Your perceptions need to change. You need to be essentially educated on what Satan has in mind for 21st century society. And in many ways, it's not a pretty picture. Mythology, The Coming Great Deception, yours for $19.95. The Mount Hermon Roswell Connection, also $19.95. But I want to make a special offer. If you order these two DVDs plus the Ancient Book of Enoch commentary that J.R. Church and I produced, altogether this would come to about a $69.95 total, and we'll just take $10 off of that and send it to you for $59.95. Just ask for the Rob Skiba package when you call. You get all three DVDs, and believe me, Rob spends a lot of time referring to the book of Enoch, and Rob, in a moment, I want to ask you a couple of things about that. Call the 800 number on your screen, 1-800-475-1111, and ask for either the 2 DVDs separately or both of them, or the Rob Skiba package, all 3. And by the way, the Book of Enoch commentary set that JR and I did has 4 DVDs in it, so it's got a few hours, and you'll really enjoy it. 1-800-475-1111 is the number, and that's for the whole package, $59.95 plus shipping and handling. Rob, let's talk about the Book of Enoch. A lot of people kind of want to throw it away. Say, oh, we can't depend on the Book of Enoch because it's not canonized scripture. It's not the Bible. And yet, and I think you do a really good job of this, you point out that much of the Bible gets its information from the Book of Enoch. In fact, Jude is most obvious. Jude quotes Enoch. But there are other places where the audience who reads the Bible is expected to know some of the things that are only found in the Book of Enoch.
Right. Yeah, Jude, in our modern way, we would say he cut and paste,
yeah,
entire sentences right into his book. But what I find interesting is when we look at our 66 books, when we look at Genesis, it's the first book of our Bible, right? And you're only 6 chapters into the first book, and Moses throws out a word, Nephilim, which presupposes 2 things: that he knows what a Nephilim is, and that his audience does as well. Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't elaborate on it.
Right.
So where did they get that information from? And I understand Moses sat and talked with God personally, so I get that. But he didn't feel the need to explain it any farther to his audience, which says to me they had to have some, whether it's oral or written, they had to have some knowledge passed down, I believe, from ultimately the pre-flood world that was passed down through the generations after the flood. But the fact that Jesus quotes from it, Peter quotes from it, Jude quotes from it, the early church fathers considered it scripture. Some of them did, some of them debated it. But in my view, if it's good enough for Jesus, Peter, and Jude to quote from it, it's good enough for me to at least look at it.
Now let's talk about those people called the Nephilim, or giants, in Genesis 6. Enoch actually mentions them by name. And I think he mentions the ringleaders, basically.
Yeah.
About 20 names.
Right.
And one of them is called Azazel, sometimes pronounced Azazel, or there are a number of different pronunciations. But he seems to have been a kind of a ringleader and actually has a reputation for being sort of the focus of evil. And later on, his name was incorporated into Jewish worship.
Well, not only that, it's part of their ritual. In Leviticus 16, it talks about, depending on your English translation, sending the scapegoat out to Azazel. Mm-hmm. Again, that presupposes that you know who Azazel is.
Exactly.
Because you're only in the first book of the Bible, or at least the first 5 books of Moses. You're in Leviticus in this case, and he's talking about this other character who, as you said, is named. And so the book of Enoch tells you that 200 fallen angels landed on Mount Hermon in the days of Jared. And then, as you said, it goes on to list 20 of them as sort of the captains over the 200. And Azazel is listed, he's recorded as being the worst of all of them. And God actually makes a pretty extraordinary statement about him. He says to the archangel Raphael, he says, ascribe all sin to Azazel.
Wow.
Bind him in chains and put him in the desert place called Dudio. And so when you see the Jews, they would, this is actually tied to another scripture a lot of believers are familiar with, I believe Isaiah 1:18, where it's talking about, though my sins be as scarlet, they are made white as snow. Mm-hmm. What a lot of people don't realize is that's actually tied to Azazel, the character of Azazel, because when they would send the scapegoat out, they would tie a scarlet ribbon around his horns and cut a piece of it off, send the scapegoat out to Azazel, and then take that piece of thread and tack it to the temple door. And supernaturally, it would change from scarlet to white to show that God had accepted their offering. Mm. And another interesting piece of trivia is for 40 years leading up to the destruction of the temple, it didn't change. And so if you back off 40 years from 70 AD, where do you end up? You end up in the time of Christ.
Right.
And so God is saying, I'm not accepting any other sacrifice anymore. My sacrificial lamb is the only one I'm going to accept. But it's directly tied to this whole thing about Azazel, which you know nothing about unless you read the book of Enoch.
One of the interesting things Rob does, and I've got a sheet of paper here that shows a chart where the Nephilim are on earth for 1,200 years before the flood. But then comes a period after the flood, a period of 1,200 years from the flood, roughly, to the kingdom of David.
Right.
And explain what you're doing there. I think this is most fascinating.
Yeah, it's become a little bit controversial for me, simply because there's most people that subscribe to a second incursion, that angels came down again and mated with women. And I was raised never to base any belief, doctrine, or anything on one scripture. You need confirming scriptures. And so most people who believe in the second incursion will talk about Genesis chapter 6, 1 through 4. And that's pretty much the only verse they have that specifically says the sons of God came down and mated with women. In the post-flood scenario, you constantly see references to the giants, but it's usually another part of it would say the descendant of so-and-so. You know, this giant was a descendant of, descendant of, descendant of. And they were typically all within the lineage of Ham that they're described. So just based on that, using all these other scriptures that refer to descendants of, I base my theory on the Nephilim seed perpetuating after the flood via genetics. You have the same problem either way. If you've got angels coming down and mating with women, they produce offspring who mate with women again, who mate with women again. You've got a genetic issue either way. So
now, let's talk about giants for a minute, because I want to get this in before the end of our time today. Today, if I were to go out and accidentally happen upon the skeleton of a giant, and if I excavated it, there would be a huge, huge cry. I think I might be forced to hide it somewhere so that it couldn't go on display. And there seems to be an active campaign to hide the fact that there ever were giants on the earth. And yet, I think you make a very clear point that giant skeletons have been found. In our era, they are spirited away, I think probably for the sake of propaganda, to disprove what the Bible says actually happened.
Right.
Now, we have giants coming all the way up. Of course, David and Goliath, famous story. And everybody thinks, well, these were just glandular cases. You know, they were regular human beings who just, for some reason, grew too tall. Not so, right?
Too tall, twice as tall, 3 times as tall. That's way tall. That's why I say, how do kissing cousins produce 12-footers and 15-footers, 18-footers?
Right.
And Amos 2:9 actually says that God describes the Amorites as tall as cedar trees. And I don't believe God's in the habit of telling tall tales like, fish stories.
Well, that would be 30 feet or so.
Minimum. The cedars of Lebanon got to 150 feet.
Wow.
So if you're looking 35 to 150 feet, I just take scripture for what it says. I try to take it literally, and that's what I try to show in my chart that I developed, is that they were on the earth for 1,200 years before the flood, and they were still on the earth after the flood for at least 1,200 years leading up to the time of David, when he and his mighty men took out the last of them. And so those are some of the things that I'm trying to pull out up from the scriptures, which I found people are really hungry for this information.
Oh, yes.
Especially young people, because now the Bible is exciting. Young people because they see the Harry Potter movies and the Lord of the Rings and all these different things, and they're familiar with the Greek mythology and stuff. But when you can show the scriptures talk about these things.
And they've cut their teeth on sci-fi.
That's right.
Sci-fi to them is real, and the Bible is not real. Right. And that's, just backwards. To me, the Bible is more exciting than any science fiction ever written.
Big time. And it's been said, I think Steve Quayle might have coined this phrase, but the understanding of Genesis 6 and the Nephilim is the Rosetta Stone for understanding all of it. And it truly is, because when you unlock Genesis 6 with the understanding of the Nephilim, all of a sudden now it all starts to make sense. Why God says, wipe out the women, the children, the animals, everybody. Before, I couldn't understand that. It seemed like God was into genocide or something.
Right.
And it used to scare me, the Old Testament. But now I understand God is systematically wiping out the Nephilim races in the Holy Land.
Rob Skiba has produced what is really an enrapturing DVD. Listen, believe me, you put this in and you'll stick with it to the end. I did. I was just really drawn to the way he pulls facts together. It's called Mythology and the Coming Great Deception, yours for 1995. He's also produced the Mount Hermon-Roswell connection. There are facts in here that will just boggle your mind. Also 1995, and these run about an hour and a half each. We also would like to put this together with another DVD, which we offer it for $29.95. It's called The Ancient Book of Enoch. Put these all together, that would be about $69.95, and we'll take $10 off of it. When you call the 800 number, just ask for the Rob Skiba package. You get all three of these for $59.95, which, by the way, is a substantial saving. And the Book of Enoch commentary will help you understand Rob's DVDs, because Rob, you do refer to Enoch quite a bit, and rightly so. And so just ask for the Rob Skiba package, and it is $59.95 plus shipping and handling. 1-800-475-1111. We've got just a little bit over a minute left. People need to wake up, and that's basically the business you're in. You're trying to kind of wake up Christians and let them know the lateness of the hour, the fact that some of the spiritual deception of the ancient world is soon to be unveiled on the modern world.
Yes, and the devil is working really hard at it. When you look at like Ancient Aliens, they're constantly pushing this idea of panspermia, that the gods of the old ancient world seeded this planet. And I've been saying, what's going to happen when one of those mile-wide ships parks over a city and out pops the Anunnaki, and they say, hey, remember this Sumerian text? Hey, remember the Nazca lines in Peru? Remember Pumapunku and all these places? Yeah, that was us. What are people going to believe? What's the church going to believe?
People from the stars are coming here as ambassadors. A satanic lie. You believe that? I believe it. We're really talking about the realm of the demonic, and you need to understand what's happening. And of course, Rob's DVDs will help you. We're very pleased to have Rob here today. Rob, we'll talk to you again on our next broadcast. Gary Stearman, reminding you to have a great day in the Lord and to keep looking out.
And it was doing great. It just was flying out. People loved it. At that time, we didn't have any money. My wife and I were flat broke, and he's sending us orders for like 1,000 DVDs, and I didn't have the money to go produce them. You know, I'm like, and they weren't paying. There was like pay 30 days out or whatever. I'm like, oh man. So I mean, here's Sheila and I burning. You know, we get the these deals at the Fry's Electronics or whatever, right? You know, get some discs. We're burning them, one-offs on our computer and putting stick-on labels on them. And like, we got a shrink wrap machine thing, and we had a little assembly line in our little 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom apartment. And as soon as the disc comes out, we're putting a label on it, we're shrink wrap it, and Sheila and I are doing this little assembly line until we got to the point where they were finally paying us, and then I could go out and get them professionally produced. But I mean, it was like, woohoo! we finally arrived! Yay! I come out with pre-trib rapture. All of a sudden, they scrubbed all evidence that I ever existed in the Prophecy in the News. I had full-page spread in their magazine. Gone. I had videos on YouTube, on their YouTube channel, that were in some cases exceeding Tom Horn videos and views. Pulled. Not getting invites to conferences anymore. And we were back in the dirt again.
Well, I've been exposed to enough of the quote-unquote in crowd to know exactly what you're saying. And the truth is the truth, but you've just gone overboard. And I can see why you were scrubbed.
Oh, yeah. And there are other things. Like in my first book, I had written a chapter talking about Christmas and Easter having nothing to do with our Savior, and that they're totally pagan and, all that. Well, I mean, for most of these ministries, Christmas is big bucks, man.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
like, that's the, get your Christmas special package deal, blah, blah, blah. All of the pitches come out and everything. And I came out with like the 10 reasons why Satan loves Christmas, in my book. So, I mean, I was getting it. I just, and 9/11's an inside job, and, a lot of stuff that people weren't going to touch publicly, even though you could talk to some of these guys privately and they would be on the same page, but they know it's career suicide to talk about some of these things, or to use another translation besides the King James Bible, God forbid, in your book, And I was like, hey, this is a more accurate rendering, so I'm going to use this translation. And, just read the Hebrew or the Greek for yourself. You can see it's a more accurate translation.
Right.
The King James translators, I love them. They're great. They're wonderful, but they're not perfect.
Right.
And, they say it's the only, and I grew up King James only. It's all I've ever heard but they would tell us it's a literal word for word perfect translation. How can you say that when they replace the name of God over 6,000 times with the generic title? The Hebrew is Yod He Vav He, and they replaced it with the Lord.
Right.
Over 6,000 times. So that just by that alone, I'm going to stand in the face of a King James only guy and say it is not a literal word for word translation. And anybody with half a brain and the ability to read can figure that out for themselves. Look, I love the King James Bible, but don't give me that perfect. It's, literal word for word. So, and these are the kinds of things that were constantly getting me in trouble, And so Doug Hamp and I did, as we're going through the book of Revelation, we get to, I think it was chapter 4 maybe. And that's one of those chapters where John is pulled up, right? And so some people who believe in the pre-trib rapture will use that as a type and shadow. See, there's no mention of the church after chapter 4, and John is caught up. So he's a metaphor figure, for the church going up. I'm like, no, that's not what it says. And so, episode 17, both Doug Hamp and I were bantering back and forth on this, and I was coming out pretty hardcore going, this isn't what the scriptures are saying to us, what most pre-tribbers wanted to say. And then on episode 18, I said, okay, Doug, I came out pretty hardcore in the last episode, point blank, where are you on the pre-trib rapture now, based on our discussions, And he said, and I knew he was really weighing the cost in his head, because he kind of took that deep breath and said, I got to say, I don't believe it's biblically supported. Boom, kick to the curb.
Oh.
He had like, if I had like a half a page or a page spread in their magazine, he had like 5 pages. I mean, at one point, Bob Ulrich said that Doug should be buying his own island by now, because his products were doing well. Kick to the curb, man. Pow! That's when I knew, okay, it wasn't just me. It's hot button topics. And, I'm in your face. I'm pretty brash, kind of rah. Doug is very pastoral, very laid back, like the sweetest, nicest guy. And yet he got the exact same treatment I got,
Ouch.
And then at that point, you reach a certain level when you're like, okay, screw it. What more can they do to me? So if a subject came up, I didn't care how controversial it was. If it caught my attention and I got passionate about it, what do I got to lose? I'm already on the blacklist for everybody. So, and it kind of got comical because another guy came out with something, he got blacklisted. And so I just, as a knee-jerk reaction, I went out and bought the domain name. I bought the URL, blacklistedheretics.com. I haven't done anything with it, but my thought was, I'll just become the catch-all for everybody get kicked to the curb, And maybe the heretics can band together over here and start our own thing someday. That hasn't happened yet, but that was my thinking.
Oh, it's coming soon.
Yeah, well, it does seem to be that way. And then you mentioned flat Earth, and holy cow, you want to talk about a firestorm? That one, I mean, you got these idiots out there saying, "Oh, Skiba's just doing this for fame and fortune." Seriously, I don't know where these people come from. I mean, flat Earth just about sent me into a second bankruptcy, for crying out loud. I mean, seriously. And I cried myself to sleep on a number of occasions because this deal was. I mean, it's a paradigm-shifting, mind-bending, like, what the heck deal, And for me, I've built my entire life and ministry by saying my Bible is true. It's my source for truth. You can take it literally, except for where it obviously tells you not to when it's using parable or allegory or whatever. And here, my Bible, in no uncertain terms, from Genesis to Revelation, if you believe, as I do, that the Bible is Holy Spirit-inspired men wrote this thing, then under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, these guys are telling you, you live in a snow globe, And, I put together the website, testingtheglobe.com, put all that scripture reference and everything on there, crying myself to sleep going, God, what is the deal with this? And his only answer to me for a year was, I said what I said.
Oh,
like he wasn't apologizing for it, And, but I mean, okay, great. Can you prove it? Can you help me out here? He wouldn't, and he just made me. And after I came back from Lake Michigan, I continued those prayers, but the answer changed. It went from I said what I said to, "Are you going to believe me now, Rob, or what?" And it was like that kind of an attitude I felt in my spirit, you know. And I finally just threw in the towel and said, "You know what? Come what may, I'm just going to take a stand, because I can say one thing I know for sure. I have many questions about these other things, even still. One thing I know for sure is that Bible has been my compass in a sea of lies for 47 years. It has never failed me. In some of the most difficult, trying times of my life, it has pulled me through. And you know, the Father who orchestrated that, who authored this book, same thing. And so I said, you know what, Father, let God be true and every man a liar. I'm just going to take a stand and say, I believe what your word says. Two things happen. Three things happen. One, a 1,000,000-ton weight was lifted off my shoulders. I became very light after that. The second thing was I felt the favor of God upon my life like I have never felt it ever. And I've had some significant favor. You've heard some of my testimony. I could spend the entire day talking. But I felt like the only way I can put it is like I felt his smile on me. The third thing that happened was I almost immediately saw a paradigm shift in social media, where in 2015 and 16, there was a lot of resistance because it was new. It was the cognitive dissonance everybody was dealing with. And it was everybody firing darts and saying you're crazy, you're a psycho, and you know, you're out of your mind and whatever. I mean, all of that. That was 2015 and into 16. But right around June, at least for me, from my perspective, after the Chicago skyline thing, I started to see more and more people, because people were watching me. You know, I've got a pretty sizable audience. We've got about the same size. I think we both got about 87,000 or so subscribers. You know, people have seen my journey. And I think what happened was a lot of people at first like, oh, Skiba's lost it. We liked his Nephilim stuff and Babylon Rising. That was cool, but he's lost it.
That's a fact, because I was one of them for a while. Just to be honest, I was.
Yeah,
but
look, I would have done the same. I would question people if they didn't go that way. You know? So I get it. But I think what happened was they saw the abuse that I was taking and that I wasn't backing down. And after a year of just relentless, it's Rocky, 15th round, you know. You know, I just want to go to distance. I don't care if I win. I just want to go to distance. You know, I think some of my audience said, well, shoot, man, this guy's not backing down. I mean, even with all of that, I mean, dude, it got bad, man. I mean, I got to, the stress was, I wear stress in my lower back. When I get stressed out, my back starts going. And it got so bad that I couldn't move for over a month. All I could do was lay in bed and like twitch a little bit. Everything hurt. And all of our support dried up. Like nobody was sending me any support checks, donations, or anything, or very few. My book and DVD sales took a nosedive. People were putting Amazon comments on my Amazon on my books. They were like, started reading the book, thought it was cool. Then I found out this dude's a flat earther. Like, how, so they're throwing my books out. Everybody thought I was crazy. I had $800 to my name in my bank. That was it. $800 and no promise of anything coming. And at the same time, my wife's father was dying of cancer in our living room. We had hospice. It was a rough time. And meanwhile, everybody's coming against me and calling me names and putting out videos saying that I'm doing the work of Satan and I'm an antichrist. I mean, it was everywhere. Everybody was coming. People were writing. There were letter writing campaigns going out to ban me from conferences. And the only reason I know that is because some of the other guys I've shared stages with said, hey, just so you know, this is what's going around.
My message to you, if you have been sucked into this flat earth thing, is to repent of the wicked sin of foolishness. Over and over again, God says that foolishness is a sin. And foolishness means stupidity.
How many books have you read on the subject?
I've read the Bible. Oh,
ding, ding, ding. None.
Yeah, because it's dumb. That's why. I don't need to, Rob. I don't need to.
you're sitting on top of Mount Ignorance with a flagpole on the peak of Mount Ignorance, condemning me and everybody else out here who has done a whole lot more research than you have. You've done zero by your own. Zero.
Okay.
None.
Okay. So do
Zero,
you believe
nada.
the earth is flat?
I believe what's on the screen right here is what the Bible says, and I'm choosing to believe what the Bible says is true.
Frankly, in our opinion, it's divisive and it's a distraction.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and I think the enemy is using it to divide a lot of people and just create confusion where there doesn't need to be.
These people are lying through their teeth. Don't you understand that there are people out there who make this stuff up and post it? I mean, they don't have a reputation. Who cares? They post this stuff online and laugh through their teeth at you.
Don't be stupid here. Don't be a tool of Satan promoting this garbage. There are the people who are behind it. I think the people who make these videos, like this Rob Skiba or whatever his name is, these people are evil people.
Rob Skiba he's a former male model. So his appearance is everything.
They're just doing this to do the work of Satan, just to make asses out of God's people, make them all look like fools. And he's doing a pretty good job making people look like retards.
The people who are convinced of this, it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. They've been overtaken by an alien virus, and there ain't a thing in the world you can talk them out of it with.
These flat earthers are doing the work of Satan.
They're taking the allegorical, poetic language of the Hebrew, because most of the Hebrew scriptures are in poetic or linguistic literary form. The prophets, the writings, and even some of the Torah. And they're taking this allegorical, figurative language, and they're turning it into scientific statements, which is it's not rightly dividing the word. It shows a gross lack of understanding of the scriptures. We don't take poetry and turn it into scientific fact.
I have a question for Rob Skiba. Uh-oh. So, are you still set on the fact that the earth is flat?
I got a letter on my blog, a comment, and his name is Bill. It was so well written and so articulate, and it expressed exactly how I feel. And so I want to read what he wrote. The flat earth movement, it seems to be very strong, a very strong heart idol to those who have succumbed to it. It's way more than just an errant understanding of astronomy and the natural world. It involves interpreting selective parts of Scripture to quote-unquote prove a quote-unquote flat earth. And it gets wrapped around the axial of righteously, quote-unquote righteously, endeavoring to expose the vast conspiratorial lie of NASA and science, which has satanically been deceiving the world about a flat earth, because their heart delusion asserts if the spherical earth deception, quote-unquote deception, was exposed, then people would know Jehovah is real. He would be proved, supposedly proved. So this may be a little convoluted. What Bill is saying here is that the people in the Hebrew roots movement that are advocating a flat earth are saying that NASA and science know the earth is flat, but they are, because of conspiratorial theories, they have been lying to us that the earth is round or spherical as opposed to flat. And they also, I might add, these people don't believe we actually went to the moon. They believe that's all a lie and it's all a hoax. The internet is a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there's good on there, but there's also evil. And there's so many YouTube videos and so many things where people can get their ears tickled and find anything on any subject, and it gets them away from Messiah. And that's exactly what this flat earth thing and the Nephilim and all of this Book of Enoch, all this stuff is all about. I rebuke it in the name of Yeshua. I rebuke it in the strongest terms, and I rebuke those leaders who, self-promoting leaders, supposedly those false leaders and false teachers who are emphasizing this and teaching it. You are taking people away from Elohim and away from Yeshua. You are not bringing them to him, and you are to be rebuked. Shame on all of you who are or any of you who are doing this.
And every time you say the Bible teaches that the earth is flat, you are being blasphemous. You are making a mockery of the Word of God, and you need to repent of your stupidity and foolishness and quit making a mockery of the holy, eternal Word of God that is perfect in every way. The Bible's not stupid. You're stupid.
So it sucked, man. It sucked, and it hurt. It hurt bad. Some people saw that. They saw what was going on, and they said, well, you know what? If he's willing to go through all that, maybe I'll look into it. And all that time,
that's exactly what I did, Rob, honestly.
Well, I'm telling people the whole time, I'm like, look, just take 24 hours. I don't care how you do it. One whole day, spread that out over a week, whatever. Dedicate 24 hours to at least considering the possibility and looking into it. Because if you do, you're done. You know, I mean, even if you start watching both sides, you start watching, you know, the flat earth stuff that people are putting out, and you watch the debunking videos, because you start to realize some of the debunking stuff just isn't cutting it.
Right.
You know, I mean, as soon as you open yourself up to critical thinking, you're like, well, I mean, there was a video that was going on, 10 reasons why we know the Earth's a ball or globe or whatever. And this was like the most potent one. People are saying it, 10 reasons why we know. Immediately, I demolished, at least in my mind, 8 of the 10. Just boom. Like, well, here's the other side of this argument that nobody's considering. You know, that the same exact results can be achieved in a different way. It's not the only answer what they're promoting. And I think other people started doing the same thing. And then it's called The Tipping Point. You know, there's a book that came out a number of years ago. It's called The Tipping Point. You know, it's like where all the weight of public opinion is here, and then eventually, you know, it starts to slide, and then you hit this tipping point where it starts to, and then all of a sudden, now the other Bible scholar theologians out there who are taking a stand against this are now taking the same heat that I was taking when I started looking into this. And it felt like a little bit of validation, you know. And it was, I've put out over 100 videos and have at least probably half as many incomplete videos that will probably nobody will ever see, because I just don't have time to do it. I don't have time.
I know the drill.
And I felt like after this tipping point started, I felt like I got the tap on the shoulder, and God said to me, I felt like, well done. It's time to move on. Let's go back to seed. And that's where I'm at now. I see stuff all the time that inside I go, oh, I got to make a video about this. I have to do it. You know? And every time I try, God says, what are you doing? Stop it. Get back on seed. So as of April of this year, my attention has been intentionally moving to be fully directed on seed again, because I think it's ready. And I feel a good momentum right now that when we do a crowdfunding campaign, I think we might be able to do it. So
I'm sure of that. Just FYI, I didn't shut my camera off. About 20 minutes ago, my camera died. I don't want to touch anything because I don't want to kill the live stream by accident, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
But I've been waiting for seed for years, man. So that would be ideal.
You and me both. And you know what? I'm glad it, you know, in my mind, I wanted it to go off in 2010. I wanted to be producing it in 2010. 11 the latest, and after 12 I thought surely it's going to happen. I am glad that it hasn't happened yet, because the story is going to be so much richer as a result of the journey that I've been on for the last 7 years and all the research. And you know, as a creative writer, you know, whether you want to believe this, any of this stuff or not, it makes for fantastic science fiction.
Absolutely.
You know, here's my mandate, and maybe you and your audience can pray with me on it, but I enjoy the superhero movies. You know, in fact, I'm secure enough of my manhood to say that Wonder Woman was freaking awesome. I gotta say
Linda Carter was hot, so there's that.
Well, no, I'm talking about the new one, man. The new one that just came out. Yeah, the new one just came out. I mean, yeah, Linda Carter was hot, but that was a cheesy show. But the movie that just came out, just like this past weekend, awesome. But you know, I went to see Thor. I think it was the first. It was either first or second. I think it was the first one, and I really enjoyed it. And I came out of there, and I'm like, man, you know, when I go to the movies, I go to be entertained. But if I like the movie, I'll go back and see it a second time because as a filmmaker, I want to know why I liked it. Was it the writing, the acting, the special effects, the music, all of it? Why did I like it so much? So the second time I'm going to analyze. And when I went and saw it the second time, I was grieved because I was like, wait a minute. The message of this movie is the Son of God saves the world. The problem is it's the wrong son of the wrong God. Son of Odin, right? Thor. And I'm like, God, you know, I came out of, and I'm like, here's a movie made for, I think it was like 130, $150 million. Gross is close to $1 billion, you know? And I'm like, man, I mean, is Fireproof and Facing the Giants the best we can do? Lord, you know, with the same message as Christian filmmakers, the same message. We have the same message. Son of God saves the world. But all of our movies are made for, if we're lucky, if we got $1 million budget.
Right.
And usually because we don't have a budget, we don't have the production value and we can't afford the good actors, you know. So I was like, man. And I felt like the Holy Spirit said to me, you have got to become as good at telling the truth as they are at telling lies. And so that's when I started, well, okay, how has the devil been so effective at capturing mainstream media and as a result capturing culture, all culture? As a missionary, I could go to I was in the jungles of Northeast India, people living on houses on stilts, you know, bamboo, right? And through an interpreter, I can say, do you know where the phrase "May the Force be with you" comes from? And they all know it.
That's crazy.
Do you know who Jesus is? Huh? Who? What? You know, so, and George Lucas even said it. He said the church, which used to be all powerful, has been usurped by film. And by that, he meant that he was conveying the power that media has over culture, that the church has lost. And so I'm going, okay, I have got to become as good at telling truth as the devil is at telling lies. So my prayer, and I would ask that you and your audience would pray with me on this, is that he will help me to be able to do that efficiently, effectively, and to find the other writers out there. This is a call. If you are a writer that knows, already has Final Draft software, knows how to properly format a script, so I don't have to teach you that has some experience in all of that, and has some awareness of the stuff that I talk about, so you can get into my head. I need a team of writers. I got to produce 72 episodes. I'm not going to write 72. I don't want to write 72. I want other creative input with me to do it. But we have got to understand that you cannot preach to an audience that's going to a venue to be entertained. It doesn't work. People don't go to the movies to be preached to. They go to church to be preached to. People do not serve to episodic television to be preached to. They could watch TBN if they want to be preached to. They watch episodic television and they go to movies because they want to be entertained. But yet the devil's preaching to you all the time. But he's
all the time. I can't. You're right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But he's not doing it the way we preach. He's putting compelling images on the screen that is preaching to you without being preachy.
Right.
So I've got to do the same thing. If Seed is going to accomplish the goal, the mandate that I feel like I have been given for it. So, I mean, that's the challenge, man, is to, I call it seed for a variety of reasons. One of which is that I'm just planting seeds. I'm not going for the harvest. You know, I'm going to plant seeds that the savvy audience that's watching this, if they're aware of my research and the research of others out there, Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, L.A. Marzulli, and lots of others, that they could then water those seeds with their friends and family that are watching, hopefully, this really cool science fiction TV series. They can water those seeds, and through the relationship they have with their friends and family, because conversion comes through relationship, not through gimmicks. That's what I learned as a missionary. You know,
I know somebody. I know somebody that knows exactly what you know. That is a huge talent as far as movies. I'm sure you know who he is. ODD TV.
Oh yeah, I love the guy.
He's phenomenal. I've got a chance to meet him in real life. You know.
Yeah, he's going to be at the International Flat Earth Conference. It's happening in November. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I am. I've had a few people mention it, but I think it's a little bit too far away. I'm having a couple of issues right now. So
yeah, no, it's in November.
So then I didn't. Then I didn't. I got the wrong date. I thought it was August, man.
No, it's in November.
Oh, I can do that.
Yeah. So he's going to be there. I'm going to be there. A lot of other people are slated to be there as well. I'm looking forward to meeting him. Definitely. I mean, here's a guy, you know, kind of a rap artist, musician guy, agnostic maybe at best.
Oh, he knows. He knows. He just won't say it.
He does now. Because I've listened to him talk on other shows. He's like, you know, I was really resistant to God and all that stuff. But, you know, he's watched my videos. He's watched other videos. He sees what the Bible says. And he's paying attention, you know. And he's getting it. And there's another guy who really, he doesn't, well, let me say it this way. Brian Godawa. I don't know if you know him. He's written several awesome Christian fiction novels about giants. Really, really talented guy. He's written some other really good movies, scripts and stuff too. Did a movie called To End All Wars with Kiefer Sutherland. Fantastic movie. And in that movie, it had the most powerful redemption message I think I've ever seen in a movie without preaching. So he gets it. It was about a prisoner of war. It's a prisoner of war movie about these soldiers that were held in a Japanese prison camp. I think in the Philippines or someplace. Really good movie. And he gets flat earth. He's not a flat earther. He'll tell you I'm not a flat earther, but his books that he wrote that deal with the biblical timeline are written from a flat earth perspective, because at least he has the intellectual honesty to admit and understand that the biblical authors and the Sumerian texts, all of the ancient, for 4,000 years, everybody believed, 2/3 of human history, everybody believed that we were in a terrarium. You know, so he wrote it from their belief system to be authentic to the ancient narrative. But that's, I don't care if he believes in flat earth or not. He understands the ancient narrative, and he understands the giants, and he's a very talented scriptwriter. So I'm really lobbying to try to get this guy. You know, I'm friends with him. He's just committed to other projects right now. But when I'm funded, this guy's got to make a living too. So everything I've done with Seed so far has been a passion project. I mean, nobody's getting paid here.
Right. You've been working on it for a long, long time, man.
Long time. I'm working on the comic book version of it, working on a video game. Finally got some programmers working on the video game, working on the scripts, lots of stuff. But I've been, for the most part, a one-man show with a few volunteers popping up every now and then. But, volunteers, life gets in the way. They got to pay bills,
Right. Yep.
So until I'm funded, that's the way it's been. But when I'm funded, I can actually dedicate a talented person like a Brian Godawa, hopefully, and say, hey, bro, look, I've got the money to pay you, scale what you're worth as a union writer. Are you willing to come on board? And, my prayer, my hope is that Brian says yes, because he would be an awesome guy to collaborate with. But if it's not Brian, maybe there's somebody else out there. But he gets it. He understands. He wrote a blog on Machine Gun Preacher. If you've never seen Machine Gun Preacher, it's a raw, hardcore movie about this guy with a rough background who becomes a preacher. But, it's got cursing in it. The guy gets out of prison. He has sex with his wife or girlfriend or whoever it is in the car. They don't really show it. It's not gratuitous or anything like that, but you know what he's doing. So there are things in there that you don't consider a Christian movie. But from Brian's perspective, looking at that, he's like, it's authentic to the character. It's real. A guy like that's not going to say, oh, gee whiz, golly, the bad guys are coming, George. He's going to be like, holy bleep, this is blah, 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 it's authentic. It's real. I was in the Army. You live in New England, man. The F word's an adjective for everything.
That's a fact.
It is. When I was a missionary for 5 years. I came back to Massachusetts because a friend of mine's business that I was a part of helping get started was honored by the Chicopee Chamber of Commerce. And so he invited me to be to share in the celebration. And so I went there and I ended up having a reunion with some of my Army buddies and stuff. And they're like, hey, Bob, what have you been up to, man? Haven't seen you in a long time. I said, yeah, I'm a missionary. I've been to, all these countries and stuff. And they're like, wow, no F&S, man. That's effing awesome, dude. And here I am, right? This Christian bubble, ministry for 5 years. And I'm like, whoa, like it just hit me, like, whoa. And then I realized this dude doesn't even know what he just said. It doesn't mean anything. It's just an adjective.
Right. That that boils over into the way we drive and everything like that. Road rage is it's just a driving tactic. That's all. It's no big deal.
It's New England, you know.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm a Christian. I'm absolutely well aware that I'm a Christian and I'm being monitored. And the only thing I hang my hat on is asking for forgiveness constantly because I suck at it, but I try.
Well, we did. Look, I'm a preacher online. People know me and stuff, but I've got language problems. I grew up in New England for 33 years, and I was in the Army. And you know, these F-bombs come out.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm always aware of it. I'm always working on it, and I try to hold back. But if I get mad or if I get hurt, it's out before I've even thought about it.
Yep.
You know, I'm just admitted it. I'm human, man. There's nothing special going on here. I'm telling you. You know, but when it comes to like trying to write authentic storylines, look, I'm not advocating, hey, I want Seed to be an R-rated TV series. No, I'm going to try to keep it within the confines of what was acceptable. I'm talking in the 80s for primetime television.
Right. And that bar has been thrown away. So
yeah, that's why I said that time frame. Today, there's a lot more that's considered acceptable that wasn't back then. So I'm trying to keep it. You know, it wasn't uncommon to hear, you know, hell or damn or son of a bee, you know, might come out in, you know, an episode of MASH or something. You know,
MASH,
right? You know, so. But yeah, I mean, the characters have to be authentic, and so when you got a bunch of Special Forces Army guys in a cave being attacked by Azazel,
yeah, they're not saying, "Darn it, I wish he'd stop doing that, hitting us with bolts of lightning." That's
you know, golly, gee whiz, we better run.
Right.
You know, so there might be some colorful language and a fair amount of violence, but I mean, and you're not going to see nudity or anything like that. But let's just say Seed will be PG. You know,
perfect.
Now, to be
I just saw this in the comments, and I gotta address this. There's one fella that's saying, God gives me everything I need for my channel, so forth and so on. I would never ask for money. You have to understand, we live in a system that if you don't have money, you're probably going to prison or you'll be dead soon. It's just how it is. In order to spread the word, especially on the scale that Rob's talking about, I know this project personally that he's talking about. I've been waiting for it for years. It takes money, and that's all there is to it. So say what you must, but it is what it is. Yeah. We didn't invent this system. We're just trying to fight it on its terms.
Any TV series that somebody might watch, I guarantee you, has a minimum budget of $1 million.
Minimum.
Everybody loves
Raymond, man.
Everybody Loves Raymond is a comedy show that I enjoy. It's a 30-minute sitcom. Raymond, just the actor, Ray Romano, towards the end of the series was getting hit. Just him was getting paid like I think it was $1.8 million was his salary per episode.
Per episode, imagine that.
Just Ray Romano. That's not including the salary of everybody else and the production of the show. Now, I'm definitely not going to go that route because I'm going to have no-name actors. Many actors become name actors because they started as no-name actors on TV shows. So, and they do that to save your budget. But I mean, if you've watched X-Files or Fringe or, you know, Battlestar Galactica or any kind of show that would be comparable in the genre that I'm doing, you're looking at $2 to $3 million budgets. Lost, the TV series Lost, the premiere episode, the pilot episode alone cost $10 million. That's just the fact. If you watch the credits at the end of a TV show or a movie, I mean, you watch Wonder Woman, any superhero movie, the credits are going like crazy. That's why it's a $100 million movie.
Right.
You had to pay all those people union scale minimums at least. And if you've got a name actor, you got to pay that. And, you know, a big producer or director that gets a pretty good cut. You know, I'm going to do my best to either do non-union or stay within the confines of the low end of the union scale and let everybody know up front, look, this isn't a big budget show, but I want to make it look like a big budget show within a small budget confine.
Well, it's a perfect I've heard a lot of things in this life, especially in this truth community, but what you said about media, it's just a fact. Satan is definitely preaching, but he's using the easy things. Do drugs. Everybody does that. Have sex. It's no big deal. Abortion. No worries. It makes perfect sense. And in order to fight that, you'd have to come back on a comparable scale. It makes perfect sense, man. I've
Yeah,
never
if I
done
come
it
back
like that before.
if I come back with a cheesy homemade TV series that I shot with my camcorder with my friends,
it ain't going anywhere.
No one's going to watch it.
Yep. Sad but true, but that's just how it is. So
these people who are under the delusion that you don't need money, they need to wake up. They're in La La Land.
It's true, man.
And I'm not all about money. If people accuse me that all the time, Skiba's all about money. I'm like, you are on crack. You are absolutely insane. First of all of my information, all of it, at the very least, 98% of it, is all online for free. I even read my books to you on my radio show, for crying out loud. So yeah, you could buy my book or my DVD if you want to, but my DVDs are on YouTube, either on my channel or ripped from other people ripping my DVDs and putting up there that I don't go after for copyright. It's all out there for free. So if you think I'm all about the money, explain why I'm putting everything out for free.
Right, and I can actually bolster that from my own experience. I've gone to a couple of the conventions with the in crowd when I thought everything was fine, but when I realized when they're on stage preaching that Sunday is a great day to go to church for everybody, but when they come down, they're like, yeah, don't go to church on Sunday. Actually, the Sabbath is Saturday, so forth and so on. But they don't do it because, again, it's career suicide. Going to the flat earth, that's not how you make the money, brother.
No,
you know what I'm saying? You had the wheels rolling, and then you put it. So I'd have to agree completely.
Coming off Preacher Rapture or not being King James only or coming against Christmas, all these things, preaching Sabbath, they are career-ending deal breakers for a lot of people. So look, I put all my stuff out for free. The only time I've asked for money is when my wife's father was dying and we didn't have the money to bury him, or when I fell down the stairs and busted my foot in 3 places and I had to have $18,000 foot surgery and didn't have health insurance. These are the few times that I've had to put a cry out for help, say, hey,
that's life, man. That stuff happens, and the truth community's health plan isn't very good. So there's that.
Otherwise, I've got donation buttons on my website. And you can contribute if you want to. And thankfully, some people have. And to those people, you know who you are. Thank you. You have saved my life on many occasions. I couldn't do what I do without you. So, I absolutely, and I fail to show my appreciation as much as I should. I know that. And I apologize for that. But, thank you guys, those of you who have supported. But the harsh reality is everything costs money. We're talking on Google Hangout, which is free, but the internet's not free. I have to pay the electric bill. You have to pay the electric bill. People say, well, if you're talking about godly things, freely you've received, so freely you should give. Okay, tell me what I got for free. None of these books were free. I've got a huge library of books that I studied and read in order to do the research that I did for my materials. None of that was free. This electricity is not free. Internet's not free. My car's not free. Gas isn't free. Nothing is free.
Exactly.
So I put money out, lots of it, to accumulate the knowledge that I did to put videos out for free. So these people, it really gets under my skin, man, when these people.
It's only a few every now and then, but then you get the paid trolls that come in, and it's you and I do the same thing. I mean, you've been doing it a hell of a lot longer. I actually learned by listening to you. I told you, I flipped the dial off for a few months when you went flat earth, because I'm like, oh my God, he went completely crazy. But then after doing some extensive real world testing, I went to every mountaintop in the United States, including the Rockies, the highest mountains I could find, with the P900 and a drone. 19,000 feet up in the air, the horizon that comes right up to meet your eye. If the earth was rounded in any way at all, it would gradually dip off. That would not occur, and it does, period. I live in the Atlantic, brother. You can see ships that are 60 miles out to sea. Hit them with a Nikon, they come right back in, hull meeting the water. So it is what it is. I forgot what I was even saying just then, but whatever.
Well, about, dealing with the trolls out there that go.
Because NASA has one of the most well-organized, quick to react armies of trolls I've ever seen. Go after NASA, you're getting trolls. If you start talking about holistic doctors dying off in groups once a week, you get trolls, and then you might even get a little electronic harassment, and that definitely does happen. So that's a fact. I never talk about it. Once in a while I'll mention it, but they definitely have their ways and means. So it's not conducive to a long life or a prosperous life, I'll say.
Well, yeah, and going back to the impact of media worldwide. Star Wars was made for, I believe, about $13 million, which is unthinkable today when you think of what they did with that first movie and the impact that it had in the world. Nowadays movies, they're on the low end, $75 to $150 million, and they're grossing billions of dollars, which they then turn around and make more movies for hundreds of millions of dollars, which gross billions of dollars. This is, the devil throws all of the resources in the world at his people to get his message across. Christians don't do that.
No.
They give their money to the world willingly. Like I just said, hey, I went to see Wonder Woman, so I just fed the machine. Guilty as charged. Everybody's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But then when a Christian says, hey, I'm trying to do a TV series and the budget's $1.5 million per episode. Skiba's all about money and blah, blah, blah. You should have money. What? Wait a minute. You didn't go psycho on Steven Spielberg for the last movie he made or anybody else, for the budget that they had. And if I've got to become as good at telling the truth as the devil is at telling lies, then we need the resources to do that.
That's a great, like I said, that analogy right there is perfect. I've never thought of it that way. All the time I've been doing it, I just never thought of it that way. It's perfect. You're absolutely right, especially in the society that we live in now, because information, entertainment, and it better be quick. You better keep them on their seats or they're leaving. Mm-hmm. I've never seen it this bad in my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, movies have gotten so bad now that it's just one big action sequence that you don't care about because you know nothing about the characters and you don't care.
That's true.
Some of these movies, it's like you got a 30-minute fight scene that the special effects are amazing, but you're bored to tears and you're like looking at your watch, like
looking at your phone. That's what's good. That's what's good. They just pull up the scrying mirror real quick. There's instant entertainment at all times, and it keeps them looking down, which is ideal. Don't look up. The signs will be in the star, moon, and sun. Nobody looks up.
Even when you have an IMAX 3D screen in front of you blasting images at you, you're reverting to
boring. It's unbelievable, man. I never thought I'd live to see something like this. I never thought I'd get to the age where I said, I can't believe what kids are doing these days.
Kids today.
That really happened.
Kids today. Yeah, I'm in the same boat, but it is what it is. This is the journey that I'm on. Some people, when I was in the in crowd and really looking at end times stuff, I'll say this, you are very tempted to believe, and you do believe, that tomorrow's the end of the world. And it looks like it. It does. But when you take a step back out of that, like I just came back from the first vacation I've taken in a very long time. It was my 10th anniversary next month. My sister just recently had her 20th anniversary. My parents' 50th was in February. So it was 50, 20, 10. We all went down on a family vacation down to Jamaica.
Nice.
And had an amazing, relaxing, awesome, unbelievably fantastic time. And my eyes have been open to some things, and now I'm seeing the average person, I don't care where you go, the average person just wants to love and be loved, period. And that's the majority. And when you pull yourself out of end times research, where everything is doom and gloom, transhumanism, scrying, mind control, that's happening. Pedophilia, that's happening. You need to be aware of it. You need to take a stand against it. It's happening. But it's not the entire picture. It's not the whole world. And that has led me to believe, yeah, we are seeing the signs of the end. No question. We are taking the steps into the end times. No question. But we're not at the stage where everyone has only evil continually in their heart and mind, which is what took place in the days of Noah. And Yeshua said the last days before he comes would be like those days. And as long as there's still a lot of good in the world, and there is a lot of good in the world, we're not there yet. So that's what some people look at me and they say, dude, like the end of the world's tomorrow. Why are you doing a science fiction TV series? Who cares? Right? The end of the world's tomorrow. The apocalypse. Damascus is turning into a ruinous heap. The rapture's coming. We're all getting out of here. Why are you doing? I don't believe that. I actually believe I will die of old age before the second coming. I hope I'm wrong. I'll be happy to be wrong. I'll be high-fiving my preacher rapture buddies all the way if I'm wrong. Woo! I just don't believe it. I don't think that's. I hope I'm wrong, but I do believe that I will likely die of old age before the second coming.
And if that's the case, whatever the case may be, we are told to occupy until he comes. And I believe that he gave me this vision. It didn't come from, I'm not that creative. He didn't come from me. So with that in mind, I believe I have time, because if Seed's going to happen, it's a minimum of 6 years of dedicated production time.
Right.
So in my mind, I've got at least 6 years left. If he in fact gave it to me, and if it's in fact is going to happen, then he's going to bring the resources, the people, the money, everything. And it's already sort of starting to happen. So I look at the signs of what appears to be the support for this project mounting, and I say to myself, well, if he's bringing the resources and we do get the budget, then we're going to be in production, which means I got at least 6 more years. You know.
I hope you're right, brother. I hope you're right. All right, Rob, I've taken up almost 2.5 hours of your life. So I am going to, it happens. It happens. I mean, we're going to have to do this again, because this was just too easy. Absolutely too easy.
I need to get you on my show.
That's fine. That's fine. I've never heard your backstory like that, and I've always wondered, you know what I mean? I think I tried to get a hold of you once last year, but then I kind of let go of it. But I understand. I mean, I've had L.A. Marzulli, Anthony Patch. People get really busy. And once you're out here like we are, it's unbelievable, the amount of emails, the amount of messages. And it's so difficult to get back to them, because doing this in the first place takes up a lot of your time. Doing that would take up all of your time, and it just can't happen. So,
yeah.
At any rate, is there anything pressing? I was putting up your YouTube channel, your website, and your Facebook, but for some reason, at exactly an hour, my camera went out. So I got to figure out what the deal is with that. But I didn't want to touch any buttons and screw this up. So these guys wanted you on here really bad, and you were gracious enough to come. So I appreciate it. Anything I can do to help you, Rob, just hit me up. It's easy.
Well, thank you, brother. I really appreciate that. Hopefully I delivered what people were looking for. But yeah, man.
Yeah, you definitely did. We've been holding a good, steady audience here for a long time.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for tuning in, and you know, stay on the quest for truth. I'm just saying right now that I was gung-ho in research for 7 years, from everything from Babylon to, you know, Nephilim, flattery, all kinds of stuff. But my gears are shifting to now take all of that information and try to distill it. Because here's the thing I found out, man. I could put out all these nonfiction videos where I'm passionate about whatever truth it is that I think I understand. It gets a few thousand views.
Right.
Most of it being heavily criticized by trolls.
Yep.
You know, most of it. I mean, I've realized that there's an extremely vocal minority, and that the majority aren't against me, but they're not. The majority doesn't usually speak up. They're just quietly back there saying, "Wow, cool video." The ones that are vocal are the haters, and they are very vocal. But what I realize is, you know what? If I put all this in science fiction, just put it out there as a cool TV series, nobody's going to complain, because they go into it knowing this is science fiction, for one thing. And if something catches their attention, you know, people get married in Klingon, for crying out loud. they want to join the Jedi Church. This is fiction. This stuff doesn't exist.
Right.
You know? But that's what sci-fi fans do. They embrace the fantasy, you know, whether it's true or not. So I'm going, well, maybe that's the key. Take all this truth and put it in science fiction, you know, and then it reaches millions. It reaches continents.
It's a great idea, man. It's a great idea. So again, anything I can do to help, just reach out.
Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate the invite, and I'll look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Anytime, Rob. Anytime.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the video, and share it on your favorite social media sites. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned, and we'll see you back next time.